Hello, everybody, and welcome to Green Sports Day 2023. This is our third year celebrating Green Sports Day here in Canada. We're going to get into all of that history and where we're going in a little bit. First, I want to share a little bit about what you can expect in these next 3 hours. So, we are going to start with a little bit of inspo from one of Canada's finest climate advocates, Catherine McKenna, Joy Roland-Boa-Risoa. Apologies, Joy. Later, we'll have two panel discussions and then some fireside chats with some experts in industry joining us from Australia and Switzerland. Later, a view into the International Green Sports Day history with Eileen McManaman and a Q&A towards the end. As we go through this agenda, if you have questions at any point in time, throw them into the chat. We are looking forward to having your questions, and if we can't answer them during these There we go. My name is Maddie Orr. I am an assistant professor at the University of Toronto. And I'm joining you today from the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, Seneca, and Mississaugas of the Credit. This is still a meeting place to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and I would love to know where you are joining us from today as well. So if you would like to, please let us know your name and where you're joining from in the chat. We would love to hear it. I'm also joined by Emilie Fournel to do this introduction this morning. So Emilie will be joining us in just a moment. But first, we want to go back and look at the last few years in climate stories in sport.
And in some cases, it will make certain games and certain tournaments actually unplayable.
Under Tokyo's beating sun, it's not just the lawn that gets watered. So do the athletes competing in what could be the hottest summer games yet.
It is a bit warm and it's a bit taxing, but we're doing okay with it.
There's a lot of talk about not just the incredible heat in Tokyo, but then there's a typhoon on the way as well. Is that affecting any of the events coming up?
Yes, that is the case. And rowing has actually been moved up a day to today, Sunday. It was initially scheduled to take place on Monday, but that's been moved up because of that concern there with those heavy rains and strong winds coming in. That will also impact sailing, and it will also impact surfing.
Tokyo's extreme conditions are a preview of what's in store for future summer games.
There's drought. You know, anybody who's relying on grass is going to be troubled.
Lengthy droughts and even relatively short periods of extremely dry weather can have serious and lasting consequences for a golf course, including damage to playing surfaces and lost revenue. Water shortages can also lead to rising water costs and future restrictions.
And then we have wildfires. You know, just before the pandemic began, you know, we all thought the story of the year was going to be Australian wildfires so bad that cricket in Sydney and the Australian Tennis Open, you know, were engulfed in impossible air pollution.
This is just downright dangerous. I don't know what the tournament is thinking. How hot does it need to be? Does somebody need to actually die before they say, oh, maybe we should close the roof?
First it was the wildfires, now it's the smoke. With a boost from Canada's prevailing winds, smoky air is spreading from Western Canada all the way to New Brunswick.
The hazy skies have exposed residents to toxic levels of unhealthy air, but some remain unaware of the danger.
Are you monitoring all the weather forecasts for this weekend, the air quality in LA right now?
Should I be?
Yeah, maybe.
Symptoms would be, irritation of the eyes, nose, and throat. But in terms of lower respiratory symptoms, it would be cough and wheeze.
Triathletes in Montreal today were defeated before they even began.
All the bikes are usually lined up. So the athletes come from over here,
All the preparations were made, but when Montreal recorded the world's worst air quality due to wildfire smoke, organizers pulled the plug.
This is an aerobic sport, so we have to put at the forefront the safety of the athletes, the safety of our volunteers, of the workers on site.
A Montreal music festival was also canceled, city-run outdoor sports facilities were closed, and in Mont-Tremblant, more disappointed athletes after a half Ironman was called down.
For the first time in Winter Olympic history, the Games are being organized with only artificial snow. For several weeks, cannons have been spraying sites with over 2 million cubic meters of water. And while athletes are aware of the environmental damage, there's nothing they can do.
Forcément, j'aurais préféré un endroit avec de la neige naturelle. Et je crois qu'il ne faut pas hésiter à le dire pour espérer que les prochains événements prennent en compte la préservation de l'environnement. Et puis, ce n'est pas ça qui va m'empêcher de vivre pleinement ces Jeux Olympiques parce que de toute façon, le mal est fait. Et maintenant, on est tous là, on a envie de se dépasser tous ensemble.
There's a lot more of that to come. And remember, we can't just be talking about elite sport. You know, grassroots sport everywhere will take more of a hit than professional sport. The top end of professional sport will take less of a hit than the bottom end of professional sport. And everybody in the global north will be doing better than in the global south.
We now have a very special video from MP of Milton, Adam Van Coverden, a four-time Olympian and Olympic champion in the sport of kayaking. So let's hear from Adam.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Green Sports Day in Canada. I'm honored to stand before you today on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe as a representative of the federal government to emphasize the importance of recognizing sustainability in sports and to talk about how athletes in the sector alike can serve as powerful levers for positive change right around the globe. My name is Adam Van Coverden. I'm the Member of Parliament for Milton, and I'm also the Parliamentary Secretary to both the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, as well as the Minister of Sport. So this day is tremendously important to my work, but it also means a lot to me personally. I spent about 18 years on the national kayak team, and I had the privilege of competing for Canada at 4 Summer Olympic Games in Athens, Beijing, London, and Rio de Janeiro. And throughout my career, climate change had a really significant impact on our training and competition. There were algae blooms when we were training in Florida, smoke warnings when we were in California, poor air quality all the time, and extreme heat days in Australia that made it impossible to do our training and compete, but it also had really profound impacts on our health. At the same time, sports and all the travel that we do as athletes and all the activities that we love, they have an impact on our emissions. So our obligations are actually really clear. We have to be ambassadors for change. We have to lead the way locally and globally to fight for a greener, cleaner future where the health of future generations isn't imperiled from simply breathing the air and being outside. It's critical that we acknowledge that our planet faces extraordinary environmental challenges. Climate change, extreme weather, biodiversity loss, and habitat destruction are all stark realities that demand our immediate attention and collective action. Our federal government recognizes the urgency of addressing these challenges. We're committed to achieving our UN sustainability goals, our emissions reductions targets, and protecting 30% of our land and waterways by 2030. We're determined to do our part to preserve the earth for future generations, and I want to thank all of you for raising your voice and using your platform as well. Sport has an immense global reach, so it's really uniquely positioned to drive positive change. By integrating sustainability practices into the sporting activities that we love, we can inspire millions of people to adopt more sustainable lifestyles and contribute to a cleaner, greener world. We can achieve this in several ways. First, through inspiration and education. Athletes and sports organizations can serve as role models and educate the public about the importance of sustainable practices. Second, innovation. Sports have always spurred on innovations in technology and materials, leading to breakthroughs in sustainable design, energy efficiency, and waste reduction. Third, community engagement. Sporting events provide an ideal platform to engage communities in environmental initiatives, from tree planting to cleanup drives, which foster a sense of collective responsibility and a love of the outdoors. Fourth is advocacy. Athletes, as public figures, are awesome advocates for environmental causes and policies, and people listen to you. Last is the economic impact. The sporting industry can promote green jobs, sustainable tourism, and local economic development, which creates a positive ripple effect in communities right across Canada and the world. So today, as we gather and celebrate Green Sports Day in Canada, let us reflect on the power of sport to bring about positive change. Let's recognize that every action we take towards sustainability in sports is a step towards a better future for our whole planet. Let us also unite in our commitment to reducing our environmental footprint, conserving our natural resources, and promoting a more sustainable way of life. No one's alone in this. This is a team sport, and today we celebrate and join forces to commit to a greener and more sustainable sports sector in Canada. So I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to all the athletes, organizations, and individuals who have embraced climate action and environmental stewardship. And I especially want to thank the Green Sports Day Coalition members led by Canada Games Council for volunteering your time and making today possible. This is a perfect example of various entities working together towards action and solutions that are so needed in our current climate. As both a Canada Games alumni and as an Olympian, I'm thrilled to see all of these organizations and individuals working together on this important initiative. Together, as a nation, we can leverage the passion and energy of sport to build a more sustainable and resilient Canada. So thank you for being here today and contributing to the momentum of Green Sports Day in Canada.
Okay, so we just saw two very different videos. One that was pretty grim, showing us exactly what challenges lie in our future unless we take serious action now. Then we heard from Adam, who had a very inspirational message about the power of sport. I'm fortunate today to be joined by the amazing members of our Green Sports Day Canada committee, many of whom you'll hear from on this call. And before we introduce our keynote, I want to invite Émilie Fournel to join me for a minute so we can just break down exactly what we're celebrating today and what we have to look forward to in this movement moving forward. Émilie?
Merci Marie. Bonjour tout le monde. Mon nom est Émilie Fournel. Donc, je suis 3 fois olympienne en canot-kayak de vitesse. Je travaille présentement pour le Comité olympique canadien pour le Athlete Marketing et l'héritage olympique. Donc, je fais partie du groupe de la coalition depuis les tout débuts. Merci d'être ici. On est très heureux de pouvoir célébrer la Journée des sports verts pour la 3e année au Canada. La Journée des sports verts est relativement nouvelle pour nous, mais elle n'est pas nouvelle pour le monde. En 2016, le Green Sport Alliance, basé aux États-Unis, a écrit au Bureau de la science et de la technologie de la Maison-Blanche pour demander la reconnaissance d'une Journée des sports verts pour tout leur pays. Puis l'administration Obama a répondu à l'appel et a proclamé le 6 octobre la Journée des sports verts. Donc, quelques années plus tard, d'autres pays se sont joints à la lutte. Puis nous, on est heureux d'annoncer qu'ici au Canada, plusieurs juridictions ont à nouveau reconnu le 6 octobre comme la Journée des sports verts. On aimerait un peu les nommer parce que notamment, il y a la ville de Toronto, Vancouver, Ottawa, Regina, Saskatoon, Edmonton, ainsi que les provinces de l'Ontario et de la Colombie-Britannique. On est aussi reconnaissant d'avoir le soutien du gouvernement fédéral actuel, car la journée s'inscrit dans le cadre de plusieurs initiatives sur lesquelles il travaille, comme on a entendu dans le vidéo. Le travail visant à rendre le sport canadien plus durable se fait de plusieurs années. Les Jeux olympiques de Vancouver en 2010, par exemple, et les Jeux panaméricains de 2015 à Toronto sont des super exemples qu'il est possible de faire quelque chose lorsqu'on conçoit des installations avec des plans d'utilisation à long terme et qu'on accélère, par exemple, des projets de transport en commun. On a aussi beaucoup d'autres exemples au Canada, comme le CLGP, qui a maintenant une équipe canadienne, le marathon de Banff, qui est une des courses les plus écologiques au monde, les Jeux du Canada, qui sont aussi sur la bonne voie pour organiser une série de jeux durables dans les années qui viennent, grâce à une stratégie qui englobe les 3 piliers importants pour le développement durable, donc l'environnement, le côté social et le côté économique. Donc, nous comptons également plusieurs signataires canadiens du cadre pour le sport au service de l'action climatique, dont nous allons entendre plus parler dans les prochaines minutes, puis dans la séance d'aujourd'hui. Puis aussi le cadre pour les sports et la nature sur le Sport for Nature Framework qui a été lancé ici au Canada durant la 15e, durant la COP 15 à Montréal en décembre dernier. J'ai pu y assister. C'était un événement avec beaucoup d'impact. Donc, Madi, à toi pour continuer le reste de la science.
Thank you. So, like Emily said, we have years and years of a record of really strong action of climate on climate in sport across Canada and around the world. We're joining several countries today celebrating, among them Colombia, Japan, the UK. We'll hear from some of them a little later. But first, Catherine McKenna is a true champion for climate change and nature solutions. She's the founder and principal of Climate and Nature Solutions, chair of the UN Secretary General's high-level expert group on net zero commitments, and a distinguished visiting fellow at Columbia University's Climate School. Catherine is also the voice behind Women Leading on Climate, and she played a pivotal role in the Paris Agreement negotiations, facilitating Article 6 discussions at COP21, an absolutely pivotal moment for leadership around the world. So thank you, Catherine. As our former Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Catherine led the charge in establishing Canada's first national climate plan, which included a groundbreaking piece on pollution. Price on pollution. She was instrumental in creating global initiatives like Powering Cast Coal Coalition and the Ministerial Action on Climate Action and the Nature Champions Summit. She is joining us today from her home office. Thank you for being here and being part of this and supporting all of this work. Catherine, over to you.
Well, thanks, Madeline. Can everyone hear me? So I'm excited to celebrate Green Sports Day. And I did it by swimming. I went to Meech Lake, swam 2.5K with my good friend Rebecca, who also was a varsity athlete. So I was on the U of T swim team. I had to decide on a t-shirt today. I went with Stubborn Climate Optimist, not the varsity blue shirt, because we have to be, of course, open to everyone celebrating Green Sports Day. So I am in my home office. I'm also on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. And I want to talk to you about why it is so important to have athletes celebrating the need for action on climate change in a positive way, but also doing your part. So we saw the video at the start, which showed all the impacts that you're all facing. And it used to be, people would talk about climate change. Of course, some people were impacted, but it was this thing that was so far off. And young people always worried about it. I know that, but you didn't necessarily always experience the direct impacts. Well, I think that time is all over. As we know, we had forest fires literally burning across our country, fueled by climate change. And that was also a huge air quality issue. So folks could not train outside safely across the country. Also in the US, where my friends there would be like, your greatest export is now smoke. And that smoke was actually going around the world, but there were also greater impacts on certain communities. I mean, if you were in Yellowknife, you were literally evacuated. So imagine you're an athlete there. You're not worried about sport. You're actually worried, can you get out safely? And is your house going to be there or wherever you live when you get back? So the reality is we have huge impacts of climate change. But I'm just like an athlete when it comes to almost everything in life, even in politics. Everything I learned, I think, came from the pool and my lessons there. So I'm going to talk a bit about that because I think you can all relate. So when I was a kid, I did not want to be a politician. No, that was not a thing. I wanted to be an Olympian. And I remember watching on TV, Alex Bowman, Victor Davis winning gold medals. And I was so proud because they were Canadians. And so I was like 12 and I was not fast. I just started swimming, but I was like, guess what? I'm going to go to the Olympics. Now, spoiler alert, I went to trials, didn't make the Olympics, but that's not even the point. The point is, at that point, then I had a stretch goal. And like, no one thought I could do it. And everyone was like, whatever, McKenna. But I was like, I'm going to do it. I had these like inspirational posters on my wall. It was like, just do it. And there were posters about how women can do things. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. And so that is like climate change. So we have a goal, a temperature goal, very clear temperature goal. The world has agreed we need to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. And we have lots of people saying that's hard. And I was like, yeah, well, hard things are hard, dudes. But that's the stretch goal that I had. I say to business leaders often, oh, you think that's hard? Oh, did you ever see an Olympian? Did they say, oh, I'm going to go to the Olympics and win a gold medal with the time I'm doing now? No, that's not a thing. So stretch goals are stretched, like they're hard. So yeah, there can be anything harder than tackling climate change. But the reality is you got to do the work. And the good news on climate change, we have the solution. So don't let anyone tell you that we can't do this. We can do this, but like an elite athlete, and you guys are all elite athletes, or you're out there doing your sports, you got to train. You can't sit on the couch and eat candies and then think you're going to be amazing when you get on the blocks. So, I mean, when I was a kid swimming, you would have to train really hard twice a day and, do weights. And then you'd be held accountable because you go on the blocks. And if your time sucked, well, you're going to have to readjust. You're going to have to figure out what you're not doing right. And you continuously do that. And I think that's what we're going to have to do as a world. We're all going to have to think like athletes. So that's why you are the best ambassadors, because everyone loves sports. Everyone wants to be a winner. No one wants to be a loser. And so winners are the folks that actually do the work. So stubborn climate optimist, that is me. I'm very stubborn. And I think athletes are stubborn because, you got to be tough. You got to push through when it's hard. So that's my inspirational thing. You can use that message, use it with your friends, use it with your family, use it with business leaders. But let's be clear. So I did this expert group report for the UN Secretary General. He is amazing. He represents the whole world because guess what? Climate change is a global problem. And he represents the most vulnerable the best because he calls out folks and he says, the most vulnerable are the most impacted. And we see that in Canada. That often if you're Indigenous and you live in a remote community, if you're poor, you're disadvantaged, you're in somewhere where it's flooding, you don't have access to air conditioning when it's extremely hot. And maybe your only sporting thing is to go into the local school and play basketball or go kick a soccer ball around or go to a pool, and you can't do that. And so I think we need people that are standing up for the most vulnerable. But what's the problem? And I think it's important because sometimes we dance around things. And if you're an athlete, you're like, I just need to know the facts because that's how I'm going to do better. We're in a fossil fuel climate crisis. It is caused by fossil fuels. It's not caused by random things. It's actually the burning of fossil fuels. So good news. We know what the problem is and we know what the solutions are. And this is the International Energy has talked about. We gotta stop burning fossil fuels, no new fossil fuel infrastructure, super scale renewables, which we have. We have solar, we have wind, we have hydro, we have solutions. So we need to super scale them. We have to be much more energy efficient. And we got to do the work. And we got to do the work now. It's not something when people say net zero by 2050, I'm like, I don't really care about 2050. I want to know what you're doing today. I want to know what you're doing tomorrow. I want to know what your goal is for 2025 and are you meeting it, and your goal for 2030. And that's like an athlete. You got to have goals and you got to hit them. So what does this mean for you? Because you're probably like, okay, why is she giving me this whole treatise on this? It's because we need to be working on facts, and you can be part of the solution in two ways. So Adam Van Koeveren, I love Adam. We were in the House of Commons together. He's the one who got me involved in this. He's put it in a really positive way. Like everyone can do their part. So first of all, your club or personally, we need to reduce emissions. And there's many, many ways to do that. I mean, obviously it's like, using public transit or cycling, using cleaner ways, moving to electric vehicles. There are incentives there. Your buildings, where you work out. I was so excited. I was Minister of Infrastructure when we got to build net zero sports centers, where the cooling from the hockey arena was going to be used for the pool. It's amazing what we can do. So I think really thinking about those solutions, and that's also good because sporting facilities generally need to save money. So it's also about saving money. But I think also, what else can you do? So I say this to young people, this isn't just athletes, but you need to look at how you spend your money. Actually buy products that are with companies that are really sustainable. Not everyone's green, like real green, that are really doing the work, because that's actually hugely powerful. That also means where you bank. Ask your bank, are they investing in new fossil fuel infrastructure? Is that how you want your money spent? Or do you want your money, all the fees you pay, the interest they make, or do you want that to go to clean? It's a whole range of different ways, but of course, vote. I'm not saying which party to vote for, but if you care about climate change, vote. But the most important way you can do it is just be an ambassador in sport. I think the sports analogy is super powerful. I think talk about climate change and the impacts, but talk about the solutions. And you know it because they're real solutions. And what I always say to people, climate change isn't a fancy thing. Like sometimes people use terms people don't understand. Talk about clean air. Talk about clean water. Talk about how climate change is impacting your ability to train. Look, if you're in the winter sports, is there going to be any snow? But can you go outside and have clean air and clean water? Because that impacts on everyone. So I'm just asking everyone, think like an athlete and be a stubborn climate optimist. Don't give in and just keep on pushing. And at the end of the day, motivate people to do more and to have a stretch goal. But every single day, do the work, get on the block, go hard, put your head down and drive for the wall.
I wish we could all like cheer you on and clap at that because that was amazing. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome Jill Orris, who has been quarterbacking a lot of this Whole Green Sports Day this year, to join us and run a bit of a Q&A with Catherine before we move on to our next panelist. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was wonderful. I feel so inspired. I feel like I just want to go out and do all of the things that you've just said. And I feel like you've answered a lot of the questions that we talked about the tangible actions that people can take and sort of how the sports industry in Canada can elevate this conversation and go out and make positive action as a whole. But I'm wondering if you can share some specific examples of successful initiatives or strategies that you've seen or been involved in, where the sports industry specifically has played a significant role in advancing climate and environmental goals in Canada, not in Canada. And if it's not in Canada, how these success stories can really be scaled up and replicated in Canada for us to achieve some of those goals, those stretch goals you suggested.
Well, I'm going to take a very recent example. So I was in New York. It was Climate Week, and I met the mayor of Paris. She's amazing, Anne Hidalgo. So I was like super psyched to meet her because, as you know, I'm a swimmer, and she's cleaning up the Seine. So they're going to be able to, like the athletes will be able, the Olympians, the triathletes and the distance swimmers will be able to compete in the Seine. But that's not just good for, obviously, the athletes. It's actually good for people. Why? Because it's free. So we need to be thinking about cost. It's good for your health. But also with the extreme heat that Paris is going to see, it means that there's a way to cool off. So she is amazing. And I'm going to tell you a little story that I was like, she is just all in. And we should be like this when it comes to being disciplined about what we're trying to achieve. So she says it's going to be the greenest Olympics ever. And so this is an interesting story. So she was approached by an oil and gas company. And they said, we want to sponsor the Olympics. And she said, sorry, it's the greenest Olympics ever. That's just, I know you do your business. I'm not even going to comment on that. I'm just going to say that I have to be true to what we are saying. So not only is she doing things that are really tangible to help people, she's also being consistent with what needs to be done. And it's hard. Like, I get it. People need money and there's all sorts of reasons. But I think in life, thinking like an athlete, you can't go and, eat candy and not work out and then think you're going to be able to be a winner. And it's the same thing on climate change. It requires the same discipline and sometimes doing actually really hard things. But anyway, to all, maybe there's some Olympians or people who are hoping to go to the Paris Olympics. It is going to be awesome. It's going to be super green. And I think there's many examples in Canada. I'm not going to pick one or another, but there are many examples where folks tried really hard to reduce the impact of the games. Now, obviously, Adam talked about this. Often there's going to be flights involved. Now, that's tough because there are a lot of emissions when it comes from flying, but they do a lot when it comes to being sustainable. I think everyone's moved on, I hope, from plastic water bottles that are disposable. I think we all, we can do that. But beyond that, really thinking about the footprint of the event, But I think there are things that you can do is like really raise the profile of sport and your sporting event to the broader community by talking about how you're green, but what you're doing, because everyone always needs to feel like they're tangible actions. And so you can be an ambassador with your sporting event by actually doing real things and not just like the little things that are harder, and being innovative. And so, I don't know, take Anne Hidalgo, the Paris mayor's example, like have a very clear goal, have very clear measures to achieve this goal, and then be true to what is required.
Fantastic response. I love that. True to what's required, get some tangible goals on paper. Let's go. Maybe not paper. Thank you so much, Catherine. This was wonderful. I'm just going to give you a quick couple minutes here. If you could leave the audience of Green Sports Day with one final message to take away and to feel motivated and action sustainability in their communities and their organizations or as individuals, what would you like to leave them with today?
I mean, look, I'm going to leave you with what was on my wall when I was a teenager. It was just do it. Like everything comes down to just doing it. Like we can talk about how sad it is and how hard it is, or, you know, the challenges to action and whatever. That's over. We don't have time to even have that conversation. Yes, there are challenges. There are challenges to a lot of things, but let me tell you who's most impacted: people who have done the least to cause climate change. So those of us who are privileged enough to be able to live in Canada and generally have access, you know, to facilities and to supports. I mean, we're all impacted by climate change, but to really take action. And I would say, I really think, like, I spend so much time trying to think about how to motivate people on climate. Like I go to boardrooms, I go talk to politicians, and literally I've come back to sports because, as I said, everyone wants to be a winner. So even if they're not doing the right thing, they will say, I want to be a winner, because no one wants to be a loser in business. No one wants to be a loser when it comes to actually doing real things. So if you use the sports analogy, I think it'll really help, where people, when they say things are hard, you're like, yeah, it's hard. Hard things are hard. Stretch goal. Get up every day. You're not going to get the goal if you don't do the work, but you'll get the goal if you do the work. So just do it. And I think you guys are the best ambassadors. So I'm really hoping to work with athletes to do a lot more, because I think it's a way to reach folks in communities who may not be really focused on climate change. They're just trying to get through the day. They're taking their kids to sports practice. They're worried. They're like, oh no, air quality alert. We once again have a practice that's canceled, or we've got to go inside, or it's too hot and it's dangerous, or heck, we're being evacuated. So I'm not worried about sports. I think you guys have an opportunity to reach a very broad audience, and you know how to motivate, but you also know how to do the work. So be a stubborn climate optimist and just do it.
Amazing, Catherine. Thank you so much. For our audience, if you have any questions specifically for Catherine, feel free to throw them in the Q&A and we will make sure they get over to her in the next little bit here. And with that, Catherine, appreciate it. I feel like we've kicked this off with a lot of motivation. Thank you so much for your time and your energy this morning. And Maddie, I'll pass it back over to you.
Great, thank you. We are now going to be joined by a young rock star out of our West Coast. Joy Ralamborosoa is born and raised in Madagascar, but she is now based in Canada's West Coast. She's passionate about social and environmental justice and uses entrepreneurship and education as tools for social change. Her work and her community engagement, which has led her to places like COP27 and various UN meetings on behalf of Canada, have landed her in the top 150 Young Leaders Award list by Leading Change. She joins us to talk about how she's championing change through the sport of basketball. Welcome, Joy.
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here today among like a group of leaders in sustainability in sports in Canada. To add a little bit info about me, I'm also a former student athlete. I played basketball during my high school years. In college also, I played in our basketball national team in Madagascar. And I play soccer, tennis. I did compete in swimming. So everything I'm sharing today is from a little bit from my personal experience, also like experience that I've shared with the community I'm working with. And particularly today I want to talk about why climate justice is social, racial, and environmental justice, and what does it has to do with sports and why it's important for community and grassroots sports. Yeah, so as I said earlier, I'm from Madagascar. From a personal experience, for example, in Madagascar, as we do all our sports outdoor, having access to a gym is like it's still a luxury. We just have access to the gym, the championship game. So it's like you'd have to be like the best of the best to access that. So it's really a luxury. And that is still a reality in lower part of the world. Let's say, for example, just still the case of Madagascar. Madagascar went for the first time to the World Cup this year, our under-18 basketball team. And to prepare for that, we did not have access to gym. We did everything outdoor. So we used park, school playgrounds, and it wasn't easy with the heat, with climate, with the impact of climate change. But just to say like how climate change can play a big role in the equity in sports. Also, this summer, right now, I'm helping the coaching staff at Vancouver Basketball Foundation to deliver their basketball camps in different community in Vancouver. And this summer, we deliver a few camps in outdoor school playgrounds or in parks. And what I noticed is how the motivation of kids were impacted by the impact of climate change. When it was too hot, you saw that the kids weren't engaged in the activity. We have to find extra solution to boost their motivation to so even myself, I had a heat stroke and I didn't even realize it that after the camp. And and not just here in Vancouver or in Canada. For example, in LA, there is a streetball league called Venice League. They had to cancel the different games because of the hurricane. So with all of that, we can see how climate change can impact not only the programming of community sports, not just the impact on the youth directly, but also the budget of the whole organization, and also like the budget of us running the different activities. And also something I've noticed is that our public outdoor sport infrastructure are not equipped or adapt to the impact of climate change. And as I said earlier, they are still most of those space doesn't even have the minimum how to say that, requirement, I'd say, to support to adapt to climate change. Because, like, for example, at the place where we had our camps, we did not have direct access to water, so we had to bring like kids had to either bring their water bottle, or we had to carry our own water. That's with the heat. Not enough restroom close to the courts or the sports, the playground. What else? There was not enough shade. So kids had really hard time keeping up with the pace because of the heat. We had to take a lot of breaks, cancel few activities because we had to take a lot of breaks instead. So climate change is really impacting community sports, and what's important about that is like those community grassroots sports, most of us doesn't have access to gym, so the delivery of our program really depends on those public space, on those public outdoor infrastructure. So having access to those space are really key to the development of the community, because those community sports create a sense of belonging and important for the general health of the community that we are working with, especially youth, mental, physical, emotional, social health of these youth. And know that if we connect those issues with environmental justice, it's proven that equity deserving community has less green space, and their park and public infrastructure, public sports outdoor infrastructure are not the best compared to rich neighborhood, or they are the ones who really need the best infrastructure now because they don't have access to gyms. So we really need to pay attention to this issue now, because it's those communities that are directly and are already impacted by climate change right now, and we have to think of a way how can we support those communities in order to not increase the inequity gap in sports. As solutions, I think we should rethink the way we design public space, or construct public outdoor sport infrastructure to adapt to climate change. Otherwise, in 10 years, all of our park or outdoor courts will be just a waste of space because we won't be able to use them. It's be too hot, or and I think as community grassroots sports leaders should reach out to different leaders in our municipalities, for example, and let them know about our reality, to make sure also that they invest in us, in their budget, and also their strategic plan, so that we are not left out. And also normalizing adding climate change risk budget in our grant writing, so that we don't have to cover the cost of, like, for example, postponing our event or adding extra stuff just because of we have to deal with the impact of climate change. And I'm also advocating for more grants on sustainable development focused on sports. I think in 2019 there was grants by the government that was just focused for sustainable development, and I hope we'll have it again. And another thing also is to be creative, to connect sports with nature, and environmental education. Let's say, for example, I'm in Vancouver, and I'm leading trail running activities, and I'm trying to educate, while we are doing the trail running, I'm trying to educate participants about climate change, but also like the nature around me. Let's say we're gonna go to Stanley Park. Stanley Park is like a big park, city park in Vancouver, and we can talk about the biodiversity there. We can talk about the nature of the land. What's interesting is, like, the more people know about the more we create reciprocity to nature, the more we are interested in it and the more we know why it's important to protect it. So using sports to connect people to nature is one way to push people to act for like climate action. It could be also like organizing camps in nature. It could be a good way to. And another thing also is creating dialogue among athletes about their reality, about the reality they are in, to spark their curiosity and also to let them be creative in finding solutions, because solutions already exist and we just need to, how to say that, the solution already exists, and I also believe that every community has their own solution depending on the reality they are living. And another thing also is to educate athletes, adding more climate literacy, environmental education to development or player development of life skills. And I also want to build a network of community grassroots leaders to build a community of practice where we can focus on sharing best practice or how we can support each other in community. And also have including community grassroots sports and discussion in big conferences, so we are not left out because we are the one who needs the support right now. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joy. You are an absolute inspiration. The stories you've been sharing about how the Madagascar basketball team is practicing outdoors because there's no indoor space, and the work you're doing in Vancouver to bring that energy to local communities, bring that awareness, and really advocate for really important, powerful change through sport, in sport. It's really, really great to hear about. So thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective and all of your great ideas. As we're speaking, we're about an hour out from another huge youth engagement initiative, part of Green Sports Day, building on the work that Joy does and some of the Olympians that are on this call. We're going to be live in classrooms across the country in English and French at 1 p.m. Through Head to Head. So if you are on this call and you are a teacher or you know a teacher who doesn't have plans for a Friday afternoon ahead of Thanksgiving, do tell them to go and check that out. Because as Joy said, it's so important that we get into our communities, that we engage, and that we use athletes as a voice to do this. So thank you, Joy, for highlighting the power of athletes, the power of sport to make change, and for bringing that really kind of important perspective from the grassroots levels. Thanks for being here. Our next session is a panel, and we have three illustrious panelists joining us. Catherine Villard-Gravel is joining us from the Canadian Olympic Committee, where she is the Director of Sport Business and Sustainability. We also have Kelly Ann Paul, President and CEO of Canada Games Council, who was with us last year and she's back again. Thank goodness, because she's amazing. And Travis Holmes also joining us from the Canadian Paralympic Committee, where he works as the Director of Canada Games Operations and Delivery, bringing our Team Canada all around the world to Paralympic events and next summer in Paris. So I pass it off to Jill to moderate this session. And thank you all panelists for being here.
Thanks, Maddie. And yes, I echo what Maddie said. Joy, thank you so much for setting the tone. I feel like, great inspiration and great conversation and more inclusion that we can definitely work toward. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm excited for this first panel. I will say this first panel is more of a national focus, as we can kind of see of the parties here. And we will be talking about first steps in sustainability. So what we're really hoping to get out of this panel is for all of our attendees and audience members to understand tangible action that some of these national organizations are taking, and to be able to implement some of those in your organizations or in your individual actions through the sports community. We do encourage Q&A. However, we won't be able to get to all of those questions today, but we will take them away, and we are going to be sending out a Q&A sort of overview, answering all those questions to those who have opted in to receive email updates from Green Sports Day Canada. So without further ado, I'm going to dive right in. Panelists, are we good to go? Thumbs up. Amazing. So reflecting on your organization's varying stages in the sustainability journey. For example, the Canada Games Council has been featured in the past for their sustainability efforts at the 2022 and 2023 Games. The COC has recently released its Team Canada Impact Agenda, comprising of 3 pillars: podium, play, and planet. And the CPC just released their strategic plan, which includes a focus on sustainability. So could you take us back to the initial steps your organization took when embarking on this journey? We're going to start with Catherine and then move to Kellyanne and then Travis.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and to celebrate Green Sport Day with you all. It's very a privilege. Maybe, Jill, to put people in context, I'm just going to share what's the Canadian Olympic Committee twin mission so everyone can understand what we do. The first part of our mission is to provide the resources needed for our Olympic athletes to succeed on the world stage. And the second part of our mission is to spread the Olympic values in Canada. So specific to sustainability, well, it's been part of the conversations at the COC for a long time. We've had an environment policy in place since 1994, so it's almost 30 years ago. With that being said, I would say when looking at our twin missions in the last 2 years, we asked ourselves, what was the place of sustainability and climate action in the context of today? So I would say the first step really in this reflection was to recognize as an organization that we have a role to play in sustainability. And, you know, we saw the video earlier, there isn't a sport in this country unaffected by climate change right now. So obviously it's clear climate impacts sport, but also we know that sport impacts climate as well. So if we want current and future generation of Canadians to continue to practice sport, then we have to make it a priority. We have to make sustainability a priority in our work, and we have to do our part. And I think that's what the Team Canada Impact Agenda is all about. When we launched the framework earlier this year, the goal is to help us support a safe, inclusive, and barrier-free sports system. And it's built around the 3 pillars that you named, podium, play, and planet. And for us, it was very important to have planet in right from the very beginning, because we know we have the reach we have a reach and we have a platform to make a tangible difference.
Amazing. I love that you say sport impacts climate, climate impacts sport. I think that is so relevant and such a great way to put sort of some of what we're talking about today into context. Kellyanne, same question over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm really happy to be here, you know, building on the success of previous years. Look, like Catherine started, this is not an easy question to answer. I mean, the Canada Games Council has had standards in place for the Canada Games all the way back to 2004. We were talking about green games, right? But we hadn't really defined what that meant. So I would suggest in the last 10 years, it's become a real technical focus for our organization. And what I want to be honest about is that we stood on the shoulders of giants. So the 2013 Canada Summer Games were hosted in Sherbrooke, Quebec, and that host society took sustainability to a level that we'd never seen before. So the 2013 Games met certification standards at the provincial level for the most sustainable event ever hosted in Canada. And we thought, wow, that's great. That's amazing. They basically built water stations. They eliminated the use of plastic bottles by 90%, so on and so forth. They did extensive and amazing things at those games in Sherbrooke, Quebec. Following Sherbrooke, we had 2015 Canada Winter Games hosted in Prince George. For those of you that don't know where Prince George is, it's in northern BC. So following the wake of the 2010 Olympics and all of the focus on sustainability at the time, 2015 decided to hit another level, and they went after international standards in certification for sustainability. So they went after the ISO 2012 standards as well as the CSA Z 2010 standards. So after achieving those 2 massive milestones at the provincial and international level from 13 and 15, the council really took a step back and we said, okay, what should be the national framework? What should sustainability at the Canada Games look like? Like, we should be providing a frame and supporting hosts through this. So what we did was we hired an expert in the field, and we needed that advice. Should we put in place the CSAZ 2010 standards? Should we be going for ISO? Should we build our own thing? So we basically built a core plan with some roadmap, milestones for a roadmap to support hosts going forward. And then we had a leadership transition back in 2019. And our new leader at the time had a real strong expertise in environment and government relations. So at that time, looking at our core plan, it was felt that it wasn't robust enough and that we were at like this crux of an opportunity given the sport minister's mandate letter and the call to environment action, that we could really push this forward. So we applied for funding and were successful in that funding. And we built a roadmap, a sustainability roadmap between 2019 and 2021 for the Canada Games. So I'd like to thank, Dan Wilcock on this call, as well as the Delphi group who were supporting us in that. So Jill, I'm cognizant of the questions to come, but in terms of the initial steps, I would say from, 2000 to 2021, that's where I would start. So I'm excited to hear what Travis has to share too.
Yeah, great response. And I'll just say to everybody, as I am also with the Canada Games Council, stay tuned for more. Travis, we'll pass it over to you to answer the same question.
Great, thanks, Jill. And first, just wanted to thank you for inviting me to share here today in this really important conversation. It's really great to be here. And yes, like the others, CPC has been involved, and I guess currently we are in the early release stages of our updated 10-year strategic plan. And like all organizations, finding our way in this space, and Catherine said it really well, recognizing we really do have a role here. And it's a broad area, I'll be honest, with a lot of information to decipher. Makes it a bit of a challenging area to enter and to really get right, especially with the resource levels that we all have. But I believe we're like most organizations, we're learning, making attempts to improve and innovate, and working with like-minded partners to take steps towards being better at charting our path for the future. So as we're kind of embarking on our journey with our strategic plan, a few of the initial steps that we took, we started plotting our course here a couple of years ago, and this afforded us an opportunity to really look at our business and our operations. We were able to explore and understand where we worked and who we worked with, and how we worked and what efforts were already being made within our organizations and by our partners. And really importantly, we were able to look at what was important and what was needed for our members, our community, and our people. A couple of pieces that came from that work were to get this right, and as a bit of a bigger picture, or kind of like what's the goal piece, there's a need to have sustainability embedded in our organization, both vertically and horizontally. So the goal is to have a business area, a program area, or at least a few people that are dedicated to leading the planning and development of our sustainability projects, as well as implementing like our initiatives and our efforts across our organization to ensure that everything's connected and we're maximizing the use of our resources and our efforts. That takes a bit of time, expertise, and resources, as has already been stated. And so that really started to become our target for the future. So although that's a bit of our long-term goal, totally not, can't say it's attainable in the immediate. And so for us, there are some initiatives and decisions that can be made without kind of waiting for that perfect moment or structure. And lastly, another key piece is that we found that we have a choice in who we work with and how we do the work with them. And in a business like ours, this was important and impactful. So a couple of maybe tangible examples that we did to kickstart were from a corporate or organizational side. We made a pretty major decision that was to move to a 100% remote work environment. We, of course, were remote during the pandemic timing and successfully delivered 2 games in 2021 and 2022. But we made the decision last year to commit to remote work permanently. So a pretty big jump for us. And then maybe one from the game side was in terms of like how we work with our partners, is that we began to narrow in our focus of who we were partnering with to deliver the services to our teams, both nationally and internationally. And we based that on selecting providers and partners that were already providing sustainable solutions or enabled us to change our operations to be more sustainable. So those are probably a couple, I'll leave there, a couple of kind of tips and ways that we got started in this space. Thanks.
Yeah, great knowledge, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to kind of highlight this idea of choosing who you're working with and how you work with them. I think that's such an important piece to take away from this. You know, we are all working together. We're really trying to move, especially with movements like Green Sports Day, to sort of feel like this conversation, you don't have to tackle it alone. We're in this together. So really leaning on these three individuals and their organizations for information, knowledge, and really understanding that we have the leverage to choose who to work with and how we are going to work with them. This kind of leads into the next question. So we've talked a little bit about beginning a sports sustainability journey. We've heard from the three of you. We also know that one step is gaining support and buy-in. So could you provide insights on how your organization initiated their sustainability efforts and navigated the process of support and buy-in from key partners? Travis, I'm going to start with you just because you started this, and then we'll move to Catherine and Kellyanne.
Sounds great. And thanks. Another really great question here. So for us, being in the sport industry with like for us, a really core focus on our games and like the delivery of our operations for our teams. And with that, our business naturally works in partnership with a wide variety of organizations and service providers, both nationally and internationally. So we're quite fortunate to have some really great partnerships with great Canadian businesses that are leading initiatives in this area already. And so in the majority of the cases, our partners are somewhat bigger organizations than we are and have a wider scope than we do. So this really enables us to access technologies and business processes that we wouldn't be able to regularly with our amount of resources. So it actually makes this a little bit easier for us because the work we do is really delivered through our partners, and they have their own sustainability goals and plans in place. So with our Canadian partners, we worked with them ongoingly to provide services for all the games that we deliver. So we went to them to discuss how we work and, starting with our new strategy and wanting to explore new ways to, find better ways to do things and find new solutions to delivering our operations. They were, not only receptive, but they also already had practices in place that we could leverage. And we found that by shifting some of our mindset and shifting away from how we used to do things, really got us into a good spot there. So for us, our partners have been a big part of supporting us in this space. And I guess maybe I'll just mention in terms of our remote work, because it's been an interesting endeavor, as all of our partners have been very supportive of our decision. And in looking at this, I found that our remote work decisions also guided us in a lot of our decision making in relation to how we plan and prepare for the games. So with the enhancements in technology specifically that came with remote work and our access to our great partners, we found that we started to change our approach to how we do things and deliver some of our services. And a really good example is now we always first look to see if the work we need to do can be done virtually before committing to traveling. And traveling was always a really big part of our business, going to other countries, preparing for the games and learning to operate and deliver, do business in those countries. So for us, whether, small example, whether it means shifting to getting high quality video and using technology to analyze, to plan the athlete's village instead of a team of people traveling to a site visit multiple times, or simply just finding ways to do meetings that we would do in host countries normally in person, or hosting conferences with like our national sport organizations where we used to gather. So those are a few ways that we have been shifting, working with our partners and kind of getting that buy-in. And I feel that our partners they've been very supportive, have been still getting really high quality service from us. And for us, everything's been positive in this space so far. And I think maybe I'll leave it there. Those are a few ways we've been working with our partners to get them on board and support our efforts here. Thanks.
Fantastic. Great examples. And hopefully those are some tangible examples that can be taken away from the audience members here. I really like your leverage pre-existing practices, the need to not really invent the wheel, and you can amplify each other's messages. So Catherine, same question. I'll pass it over to you.
Yes, well, regarding buy-in, I would say that, at the COC, we say a lot that we are a value-driven organization, and it does guide a lot of our work right now. And it's the same when it comes to sustainability initiatives. Earlier in the first question, we talked about the Team Canada Impact Agenda. And when we started to present this to our key partners, and by key partners, I mean, it could be marketing partners, national sport organizations, other sport partners in the system, and of course our Team Canada athletes. We were fortunate to find out that there was buy-in almost immediately. And in fact, in the planet pillar in particular, many of our partners were already working on similar initiatives. So when we saw that, we knew that we were going in the right direction. And last year was a decisive year for us because even though we already are a signatory of the United Nations Sport for Climate Action Framework, our CEO and Secretary General, David Shoemaker, agreed to commit to the Race to Zero targets that are to reduce our carbon emission by 50% by 2030, and to get to a net zero target by 2040. So the work we completed earlier with our senior leadership team, with our board, with our different partners around the Team Canada Impact Agenda led us naturally to this commitment. And now this commitment is the North Star of the planet pillar of the agenda.
Yeah, so we'll all call you when we're struggling to get buy-in for that like golden advice of how we get everyone to buy in right away. Perfect.
With my pleasure.
And I love the fact that you've mentioned the United Nations Sport for Climate Action Framework, because we will be hearing about that a little bit later in this session. So Kellyanne, I'm going to pass over to you for the final little round of this question.
For sure. So the concept of partnership buy-in. So following the establishment of like our roadmap and what we envisaged we could do here, we really knew that we needed to host partner consultations. And it was really timely because we had to reestablish the government strategic priorities for the Canada Games, as well as the Canada Games Council's strategic plan. So we hosted partner consultations and we focused questions around environmental planning. We also were able to hang on the sport minister's mandate letter. So that was really pivotal in our ability to approach in that vein. So we talked about the concept. I shared 2013 and 15, who were real like pioneers in the Canada Games in this endeavor. We did have hosts buying in. I mean, just to name like a couple of examples, 2019 had the initiative, they planted 2,019 trees, among other things that they did. 22 built two incredible facilities. One was a net zero facility, both at construction and long-term operating. And Canada Games Park is a high performance building, and it's built with an envelope to reduce energy consumption over time. So these are natural things that the Games were doing. And 2023 had planned to advance the concept of the electric bus fleet onto Prince Edward Island to make sure that that was the way they could move around the 2023 Canada Winter Games athletes. So really, we did have hosts, our current hosts buying in. So we worked with our board, we worked with our partners, and we worked with FBT governments to entrench the environment pillar into strategy. As we all know, strategy drives energy, budget, and resource allocation for the organization. So getting it entrenched as a pillar in our strategic plan was a key imperative, which we did for 22 to 26. Reduce environmental impact is what we're looking at. And then we worked with governments, the federal, provincial, and territorial governments, in reestablishing the priorities for the Canada Games to create, for the first time, an environment pillar. So it's there now. It was approved at the 2023 Canada Winter Games Ministers Conference. So it's a big thing for us. We've got it in two core pieces. So then we had existing hosts, our future hosts, and let's make sure that we can get 25 and 27 and 29 and 31 all buying in. So our 2025 Canada Summer Games are going to be hosted in beautiful St. John's in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And this will be the first games that's going to implement kind of our 3-pillar model and 9-category approach to look at like a holistic approach to sustainability. So we're super grateful and happy to be working with them in this regard. And then we've just received the hosting plan for 2027 Canada Winter Games in Quebec City. And there's a commitment from the mayor as part of the bid, and then also in the vision put forward by the host society to work towards achieving a games as close to net zero as possible. So these are like real life examples of how we've been able to actualize partner commitments in this endeavor as we go forward.
Great highlight. I love the fact that it's coming from both sides. So it's not just, you know, the organization saying we're going to be more sustainable. It's really those partner groups coming to the table saying we want to work together in collaboration to make sure that we are moving the dial on this conversation. All right. Talking about moving the dial in this conversation, we're going to change slightly and we're going to ask some specific questions. So Catherine, I am going to start with you. So I want to talk about measurement. And measuring your current environmental impact is really crucial to be able to set those goals, really knowing what you how you're impacting now to be able to move in the future, where you might need to change practices and whatnot. So the COC does not host sporting events themselves. So considering the diverse activities of the COC, could you shed some light on the components of the COC's carbon footprint and the methods or tools that you've used to measure your sustainability efforts?
Yes, sure. Maybe I'll start by saying, sorry, that it's true that the COC isn't currently hosting any sporting events, but it's worth mentioning that part of our mission is to explore potential Olympic and Paralympic hosting opportunities in Canada, and we have built sustainability in that part of our work. We also host other events in preparation of the major games. For example, the Olympic Lab for athletes who are going to Olympic Games, or the Games Prep Seminar for the mission team staff who is going to the Pan Am or Pan American Games. So we host some events, but it's not the biggest piece of our footprint, of course. So the COC specifically, our footprint falls in scope 3, which are indirect emissions. For those of you who are not familiar with scope 3, for measurement, it's scope 1, 2, and 3. And 3 is really, it's indirect, and there are many categories where your footprint could be split. For us, we are mainly in 3 categories. The first one is purchased goods and services. So when we say purchased goods and services, we're talking about clothing, because we buy team kits, accommodations when we go in the other countries, storage or venue rental, catering services, branding and promotion, those type of things. The second category, and I don't think it's going to be a surprise for everyone with our role on the international stage, it's travel. So business travel, we also travel to host countries for site visits to prepare for the upcoming games, and we travel during games time, right? We travel a full delegation to another country. So of course, it's not a surprise that travel is one of our biggest carbon footprint. And the last one is the third-party upstream transportation. So it's a technical category. So we prefer internally, we call it transportation and cargo. So it resonates more with our people. And it's how do we move equipment from one country to the other? Is it by sea freight, air freight? It could be trucks, car rentals, and even employee commuting. This is the third piece that represents the most our carbon footprint. With our commitment to the United Nations, we measure our carbon footprint every year, and we follow the greenhouse gas protocol. And for example, when it's time to measure travel, I can maybe give an example with travel. We work with our travel agency who was able to provide us the list of all the flights we did in a year. And on that list, we have information like what was the travel distance, aircraft type, the class where the flight was booked. And with all this data, we can be very, very precise in how heavy was our carbon footprint associated with travel. But with other suppliers, we use what we call an emission factor, and we apply it to a dollar spend. So if I want to do a simple math, just so everyone can understand, if I spend $10 in travel, and the travel emission factor is 0.5, then I do $10 and multiply by 0.5, it gives me 5 tons of CO2. So, but it's just an example. This is not the emission factor for travel. I just picked a number so it can be easy to understand the math. And that's what we do. We use emission factors. So, and we understand that not all of our suppliers are at the same place right now on this, and that's totally fine. For us, it's totally fine. Everyone is on its own journey, and we want to respect that. So we collaborate where possible, and always with the goal to become a greener sport organizations of our athletes, our staff, and the sports system in general, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you've just given a very clear way to measure that. Hopefully that resonates with a number of people on the call today, and definitely, yeah, great. Thank you so much, Catherine. I love that you also mentioned participant travel, because we're going to dive into that question with Kelly Ann. So we've seen the positive impact of the CGC's work on participant travel for 2022 and 2023 Canada Games. For those of you that don't know, there's a couple articles that were released recently that go a deep dive into sort of the impacts of this and how the Canada Games have mitigated it. Could you share more about this project and its inception, its outcomes, and how it's been integrated into the CGC's broader sustainability strategy?
For sure. Merci pour la question. Catherine, thanks for, breaking down that carbon offset analysis and it's a lot for us to wrap our heads around how they calculate that. So I think that was a real good example and does certainly dovetail in the next piece. So look, as Catherine shared and Travis was talking about remote work, one of the first things when you commit to going to being, environment friendly is going to be a GHG analysis, an introspective look at what your organization is outputting and how you can, therefore, what change can you affect? And we're in like an unequivocally unique position at the council because we manage Canada Games participant travel. So Catherine spoke about the concept of scope 1 emissions, scope 2, scope 3. Like we had to months long debate about whether participant travel was scope 1 or scope 3 for the council. Nonetheless, we have 8,000 flights that run through our organization's financial statements last year for the Canada Games. So that's a huge challenge, right? But when you look at it, there's two ways to look at a challenge. It's a challenge and an opportunity. So we had to decide how are we going to look at this? So we had likewise signed the UN Sport for Climate Action Framework, which has targets and commitments towards reducing GHG emissions 50% by 2030 and then net zero by 2040. So we started working early with the UN on the concept of carbon offsets and whether they would be acceptable. So we decided to challenge, focus on this particular piece very heavily. So 90% of the council's GHG emissions were related to participant travel in the Canada Games. So obviously our long-term future is to rely on the industry to adjust, right? So we're not in the business of building electric planes and figuring out how to correct the industry. The Canada Games brings everyone across the country together. So our next best solution was to really look hard into offsets. So I do want to give a huge credit to Sport Canada and the Government of Canada because they were hand in hand working with us in this regard. So for 2023, we had a lot of students working on this, figuring out what the GHG outputs were going to be, what would the cost be, and then we were able to propose a cost to the Government of Canada with respect to carbon offsets for the 2022 Canada Summer Games. We were able to, with the amount that we were able to realize through that budget practice, we achieved carbon friendly designation at 22. So given the 23 games were 6 months later and we had learned a lot, we really took even more time to dig into to see if we could go further and get carbon neutral. So for 23, we were able to realize through our carbon offset program a carbon neutral designation. And then the next piece was to communicate it. So as you're probably aware, there's mixed messaging about carbon offsets right now. Is it really contributing to the greater good, or is it a good thing, or is it covering up a GHG emission you can't reduce? This concept of green hushing was raised, how wide and how loud and proud do we want to be about this? But long story short, we decided it was the best avenue for us and that did align with our strategy. So we did communicate it publicly. And we believe for us right now, that was a really big piece that we could do at the Canada Games Council to commit to our reduce environmental impact goals.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Kellyanne. The concept of green hushing is a very interesting one. So thanks for giving us a little bit of what that means. And I encourage everyone to look a little bit more into green hushing if you're not clear on that concept. So over to Travis. There's been considerable momentum at the international level. So with organizations like the IOC, the IPC, and host organizing committees emphasizing sustainability, like we've talked about. So how do some of these sustainability initiatives of these global bodies really align or inspire the CPC's efforts?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jill. And I think this is an important topic, as these organizations are the international leaders in our industry. And I guess best way I can answer this is a little context. So I believe that the IOC and the IPC, through their work in Agenda 2020+5 and their own sustainability targets and goals, really set the framework for host organizing committees to deliver the games in a manner that they can achieve and surpass their own sustainability targets. And through the IOC and IPC's leadership programming support, host organizing committees have been able to focus and kind of make best efforts at creating sustainable solutions for delivering their operations and the games overall. An example is the work and commitments probably that Paris 2024 has made. Their goal is to have the emissions arising from the games while offsetting even more emissions than they're going to generate. A few of the key areas they're working on, 95% existing temporary facilities, 100% renewable energy use, sustainable food sourcing, clean mobility solutions, and the use of small to medium-sized companies or service providers. All of these are really, really important areas, of course, but I'll maybe for this question just focus on their use of the small to medium-sized businesses, as this actually has quite a big impact on us and our operations. And the reason is that the influence that the host organizing committee has in a local market's quite significant, as they offer like large contracts that are guaranteed. But with this, they're also requiring businesses and providers to align and support their sustainability goals for them to be a chosen provider. So to meet Paris's requirements, businesses are having to change the way they operate, not only from a sustainability perspective, but also from a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility perspective. So really good overall. As our business at the CPC takes us to other countries to temporarily deliver services, we rely on local partners and providers for our operations. So because of that organizing committee influence in the market, we're actually able to kind of benefit and select from a wider range of providers that match our values and goals and deliver our services while also being able to reduce our impact. So maybe just a couple of tangible examples that come from this that we do is number one is we aim to purchase all of our equipment, supplies, and food in the host city or host country. This not only means like locally sourced in many cases, but also means we're not purchasing in Canada and not shipping items to the games in cargo. Our games team, along with our partners, have been working really hard to continue to get to a point where everything's purchased in the host city or in host country. And actually, for the first time for the upcoming Santiago 2023 Para-Pan Am Games, which is taking place in November 17th to 26th, for anyone who wants to tune in, we're actually been able to purchase everything in the host city. And as a result, are able to deliver our operations without shipping any sea freight cargo from Canada to the games. So a really big step for us and great work by the team. Of course, when you purchase on site, you also need a way to make sure all of those items are put to good use, reused, or recycled once the games are over. And so we work with our friends at the COC, the local embassy in the country, to identify an organization or two that would really benefit from the items, donate everything, provide support to ensure they have what's needed to actually use the items. So pretty good that way. And another couple of examples, we work with local providers to kind of supplement or offer transportation services to our team. And for upcoming games in Paris, our transportation provider is going to be able to provide electric or hybrid vehicles, which is pretty much a result of there being an investment in clean transportation and mobility in the city due to the organizing committee's requirements and targets. So needless to say, those examples show how, in a tangible way, how our operations can be significantly influenced if we change some of the ways we do our business. And for us, a big part of our approach is that we're always looking at new ways of doing things and how we can innovate to be better. So a lot of what is possible comes from the influence of the international sport leaders. So yeah, thank you.
We're seeing lots of claps coming through in the chat function. So thanks for sharing that, Travis. So this does sort of conclude the formal portion of this panel session. I do just want to, I would like to encourage those who are in attendance to add your questions into the chat or the Q&A function. We won't have time to go through them today, but we are going to take them away and we'll be able to answer them. And I'll pass them over to Kellyanne, Catherine, and Travis to answer them next week. And we'll send that email out to all of you that subscribe to get updates from Green Sports Day Canada. So we are three large national entities, and I'd just like to pass it back over to everybody on this call to just give us one word about how you're feeling after being able to talk about your initiatives here at Green Sports Day Canada and really seeing the really positive response that we've seen from all of the attendees and the participating organizations, and the fact that this has really come together as a coalition and a collaborative event. I'd love to pass it back over to you to give one word of inspiration or one word about how you're feeling after this panel today, and then we'll leave it at there. Travis, I'm going to start with you, and then Catherine, and then Kellyanne.
Yeah, thanks. I think excited is probably, I love to just do it, so I can't take that. I thought that was great. But overall, just like really excited. It's been, it's such an important conversation. We're very pleased to be part of it. I know we have work to do. We all have work to do. And just being able to do it is really, really important, and working together. And just wanted to say thank you for having us. And it's been a pleasure to speak with Kellyanne and Catherine, of course, and to hear from all these other great speakers. So thank you very much.
Was I next? I'm not sure if I was next. I'm next. Okay, good. So I think we're all in, what I would like to say to everyone is that we're all in this together. And like Catherine said earlier, I really liked it. Just do it. That's it.
I was going to say continuous learning, but the concept that we're all in it together, and this is a collaborative effort, everyone's doing what they can. I'm learning a lot from everyone that's shared anything today. So thank you. So continuous learning, Jill.
I love it. Continuous learning, just do it. We got this. Lots of thumbs up coming through the way. So thank you, all three of you, for being here with us today. On that note, I am going to pass it over to Maddie for our next session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. That was absolutely inspiring. It's cool to hear all the nitty gritty of like, here's where we stumbled, but this is how we recovered. And these are the partners that we dragged into this to really make it happen. It's interesting always to hear about coalitions coming together. So thank you for being part of this and being part of today. Our next panel is taking a slightly different look. We are going to a group of 3 panelists with Jill, who will be initiating that. But before we go to them, we're actually going to go around the world on a quick little whistle stop tour. So we asked some friends around the world who are participating in Green Sports Day in their corners of the planet to tell us a little bit about what they've been working on this year. And here's what they sent us.
Hi, I'm Bob. Sustainability at World Athletics. This year, we eliminated 342,000 single-use plastic water bottles from the event through the use of water refill stations. We eliminated 182,000 sheets of A4 paper by going entirely digital at our Congress this year. That's the equivalent of about 16 15-meter tall pine trees. And we welcomed hundreds of spectators each day to our dedicated green zone. That meant that thousands of people left our event with a better understanding of what we at World Athletics are doing to help contribute to creating a better world. Happy Green Sport Day, friends in Canada.
Happy Green Sports Day, Canada. We've just wrapped Sport Positive Summit 2023 with so many people from all over the world. There is incredible work happening, and we're so happy that you're a part of it. Happy Green Sports Day from London here at the end of Sport Positive Summit 2023.
Hi, I'm Hannah Campbell-Pegg, dual Winter Olympian in the sport of luge for Australia, and I'm currently the president of Luge Australia Incorporated. We've been starting our sustainability journey here at Luge Australia, and we've been taking the steps towards forming a committee and developing our sustainability strategic plan. We're really excited to see how it will go and what initiatives that we can come up with.
Good day and kia ora from Melbourne, Narm. I am Sheila Wegg, and I'm the head of sustainability for the FIFA Women's World Cup 2023. And I'm sitting on my apartment balcony with my plant friends. And for Green Sports Day, I would like to share with you one key highlight from the tournament, which was our biodiversity awareness project called the Football Rewilded. It was an educational installation at all the stadiums, and we asked our fans to pledge to be part of nature's team. And as most of us working in this space would know, when nature wins, we win. And I would encourage everyone who is listening in to think about all the ways we can invest more in protecting our natural world. It could be as simple as when you buy gifts for people in and around your organization. Think about giving the gift of plants. And I am wishing everyone the best of luck in all of their great green sports endeavors. And I'll see you guys soon. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Happy Green Sports Day on behalf of our entire team here at World Surf League. My name is John Suhar, and I help lead our environmental and social impact efforts. And we're working to advance sustainability by protecting our coasts through restoration projects, water quality improvements, and conservation. In addition, we're taking climate action. We're carbon neutral as a league, and we were able to reduce our emissions by 49% and our waste by 70% from our 2018 baseline. And we're also mitigating the effects of plastic pollution in our ocean. We're working with grantees to install innovative river intercept devices in rivers to prevent over 100 tons of plastic pollution from ending up in our one ocean. In addition, we're inspiring fans through our Speak Up for the Ocean initiative. And if you're interested in learning more about that, please visit us at wsl1ocean.org. Thanks so much.
Hello, hola. Soy Guillermo Castro. I'm Guillermo Castro from Bogota, Colombia, founder of Acting Green Forum. And I want to say happy Green Sports Day. We will invite you to celebrate this day all around the world. Here in Colombia, with our National Olympic Committee and with Acting Green Forum, we are working together in bringing the green sports movement to our hemisphere. And we count with you, each of you. We need to celebrate, we need to act right now, and we need to join this movement to get a better planet. Please, be with us, stay with us, and celebrate today, thinking in the future.
I am Maxwell Nyamu from Athletics Kenya, and happy Green Sports Day. Here in Kenya, we are very worried about climate change, and so we are working together with our event organizers and our athletes to raise awareness and put pressure on government and big organizations to take action. One example whereby we are doing this is that now we have tree planting initiatives. We planted so far 5,000 trees, and one of our outstanding days is when we planted 2,500 trees at one of our spaces given by government with school children. And we are continuing to do this just to tackle issues around climate change and to give us good air around our sports facilities. So I want to wish you good luck to you in Canada and happy Green Sports.
Leverage the power of the garden of the
continuing to do this just to tackle happy Green Sports Day. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I wish you all a wonderful Green Sports Day. My name is Emmanuel Boscardin, and I'm joining you from the garden of the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Together with the International Olympic Committee, UN Environment, and Sales of Change, we work on the Sports for Nature initiative. We aim to bring sports organizations together and leverage the power of sports towards the protection of the planet and, of course, towards the protection and restoration of nature. If you're interested to join us and to work with us on this incredible project to make sure we can protect biodiversity, please get in touch. Let's leverage the power of sports together. And again, happy Green Sports Day, everyone.
So thank you to all of our friends around the world who participated in this. There were a few that came in just this morning and we weren't able to share them. So we are going to share them on socials next week. Stay tuned for that. We've got a slightly longer video. Brazil's in it, Japan's in it. Like there's more perspective. It's going to be great. But happy Green Sports Day to Colombia and the US and Australia and everybody else who's celebrating. And thank you for being part of our little video. Our next panel, is taking a slightly different look. We're looking at more of a local and community-based focus with Shannon Moxie, the Director of Corporate Services and Sustainability at RBC Place in London, Ontario, Paul Oslin, the Chief Executive Officer of Athletics Ontario, and Marie-Claude Molnar, a Paralympic cyclist and sustainability advocate, joining us from Quebec. Merci d'être ici. Welcome, everybody, and I will pass it back to Jill to moderate.
What a fantastic video, Maddie. Thank you for that and pulling all those pieces together. So nice to sort of look at that international perspective when we've been talking sort of about our national perspective, and now we're going to go a little bit more local. So nice to see this on all levels. I want to welcome these amazing panelists to the conversation today. So thank you, Shannon, Marie-Claude, and Paul for taking the time out today to talk a little bit about how you are working towards sustainability within your organizations and as individuals. So we have looked at first steps of sustainability from a national and major events perspective, like I said. So now let's zoom in to those smaller scale sporting events we host on a more daily basis in Canada from an athlete, PSO, and facility perspective. So really quick off the top, can everybody please introduce yourself and give a bit of a background on your organization or individual work that you are currently undertaking? Marie-Claude, we'll start with you. Paul will move to you, and then Shannon, you'll take it off from there.
Thank you, Jillian. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Marie-Claude Molnar, and I am a former Paralympic athlete in cycling, so road and track cycling. I am currently working as a communication officer for an NGO called Réseau des Femmes en Environnement. And also I'm doing volunteer work on the board of directors for another NGO called Réseau Éco-Sportif. And I'm also part of the organization called Eco Athletes. So I'm really focused on contributing as much as I can towards sustainability.
Fantastic. Eco-athletes. For those of you that don't know about eco-athletes, I highly encourage everyone to take a look at that. Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Jillian. I am Paul Oslin, former Olympian in track and field, specialty being the 800 meters. And I'm now currently the CEO of the provincial sport organization for the sport of athletics, Athletics Ontario. Sport of athletics being track and field, cross country, road, trail, mountain running, and race walking. We're responsible for developing athletes, coaches, officials, as well as the rules to support safe sport in the sport of athletics.
Thank you for clarifying athletics, because I know that you've had some questions around what that is. So thanks for clarifying what athletics are for those who may not know. Shannon, passing it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jill. My name is Shannon Moxie. I am the Director of Corporate Services and Sustainability at RBC Place London in London, Ontario. I am absolutely honored to be participating in this today among such a wonderful and stellar group of people. So thank you so much for having me. I will actually just do a quick land acknowledgement, if that's okay. So RBC Place London is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Attawanuran, and Lenape Indigenous peoples. So we are very excited, to be on this land and share this with these people. So just a little bit about me. So I am the Director of Corporate Services here at RBC Place London. I do have a degree in Environment and Sustainability from the University of Western Ontario. And in my personal life, I'm also an NCCP nationally certified figure skating coach and current president of the London Skating Club here. So I wear all different types of hats, and they all sort of are combining together for this really important initiative. So I'm here today to speak on behalf of venues for using sporting events. And we host events of all kinds, conferences, multi-day conventions. And we were very fortunate to be able to host part of the Briar back in March of this year. And so that was sort of our first time that hosting an event which had sustainability initiatives attached to their goals. So so we were asked to provide metrics for this event, and it sort of started us while we've been doing green steps in our facility operations for the last 15 years. This was sort of a new look for us, and so we were happy to start this journey, and we look to continue to be able to do that for all of our events moving forward.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Yeah, I feel like you're coming to this conversation from so many different angles. So thanks for sharing how you're coming to the table today. So this question is specifically, Paul, for you, and Shannon, for you. We've talked a lot about some of the advancements and the positive aspects of sustainability in sport, but I'm really curious to know a little bit more about some of the problems you may be facing in implementing or getting your support for your sustainability initiative. So, Paul, I'm going to start with you, and then Shannon will move over to you as well. And feel free to jump in if you have things to add as Paul's speaking.
Sure. I'd say we have a couple of major challenges, and the first challenge that we had was even identifying our current state. So what is their current state of sustainability, and then identifying areas for improvement, because it was always given to us that we need to be more sustainable. We need to figure out how to deliver programs, and we were simply clueless in terms of, well, what can we do? Where are we at? Do we even know where we're at? So we did some work over last year with the group Racing to Zero. They were amazing at coming into one of our major championship events and seeing exactly where we were and doing a baseline for us. And then from there, they were able to provide us with a number of areas where we could look towards improvements. And that was kind of key for us, because without having an idea of where we could improve, we really were at a loss. And the second biggest challenge, which is the same for all sports organizations out there at the amateur level, is there's a significant lack of funding for sports organizations. And with that lack of funding comes obviously a significant lack of capacity to do a lot of different things. And so you have to prioritize what you're working on. And so those have been kind of our major issues over the years of identifying sustainability as an action area. We got into this really a couple of years ago when we were working with a local organizing group that was looking to host the 2020 World Masters Championships in Toronto. And that event would have been the largest track and field event that would have been ever held in North America. So there would have been over 8,000 participants and 8,000 athletes and over 15,000 participants over the course of 2 weeks in the city of Toronto across 4 different venues. So large impact from a sustainability perspective. We had a couple of folks that were really keen on engaging in sustainability and started doing some work and looking at the UN model for sports sustainability, and got us connected with that. And that kind of started us on that path. And then our board of directors at FedEx Ontario, when we were redoing our 2022 to 2025 strategic plan, set sustainability as one of our key priorities for the organization. Again, coming back to lack of funding to be able to do a lot, it really comes down to how can we find ways to reduce things that don't add an incremental cost to us.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. I really appreciate you mentioning Racing to Zero, because a number of the Racing to Zero team are on this Green Sports Day Coalition. So for the audience members, we're going to hear about Racing to Zero a little bit later today, but very much encourage you to reach out to that team. They're really supportive in helping understand what the impacts are in organizations and how you can move towards minimizing those. Shannon, same question for you, all around the problems that you might be facing or barriers or challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And yeah, as a venue, we have, unique challenges. And as Travis mentioned earlier in the last panel, you want to use vendors and sources that are on the same page with you. So we are, really trying to step up and be that venue, that source, that, responsible on the same page type of venue. So, when we were asked by Racing to Zero to provide information for the Brier, that was a challenge for us. our utility providers are not necessarily on board. They only spit out what they want to spit out, and it's not necessarily detailed, and it's not necessarily in the format that you want. And so providing that to them was a little bit of a challenge to get an entire idea of what the footprint was going to be. So that continues to be a challenge for venues. So be kind to them, because their utility providers are not necessarily on the same page. But funding, as Paul said too, funding is huge. We were very fortunate here at RBC Place London to get technology funding after the pandemic in order to improve our technology, so we use less paper, and we also had a federal funding to improve our outdoor spaces in order to host events that would love an outdoor space and things like that. So we have been very fortunate to have some funding, but a lot of local venues just simply don't have that opportunity. So that is also been a bit of a challenge. And then of course labor and people to help with these initiatives. Even just working at the event, we are a larger facility, so we did have people to sort through our waste, during the event. So that was great, but sometimes we might not always have those. We have servers and bartenders and facilities people that are doing other things during the event and might not have time or the ability to sort those things. So, labor could be a bit of a challenge, especially for local. I'm just thinking of my local arena, as short, a small staff to run the Zamboni and all of those things. So they don't necessarily have a person dedicated to be sorting through the waste in order to measure it and things like that. And then we've also had a bit of a challenge with our food and beverage suppliers, getting information from them about their sourcing. And we do have some very key vendors that we use because they are locally sourced and they do have sustainable initiatives. But not everybody is necessarily quite yet at this point ready to sit down and think about what it is that they provide and what they do. They're coming out of the pandemic. A lot of them were, hit hard. And so right now, a lot of them are still just recovering. And so they don't necessarily have time to sit down and think about, well, how are we sustainable, and even though they might be, they're just not necessarily putting that down on paper or having that in a conversation. So those are the four sort of main challenges that as an event venue provider, has. So we are definitely trying to work through those on our end and hoping that we can have conversations with other event venues to see what they're doing and what they're about.
Thank you both for sharing those challenges. I feel like sometimes it's always the rah, this is amazing, but the reality is there are some struggles here. So hopefully towards the end of this panel, we're going to provide some solutions to those struggles. I think they're coming in form of a collaboration conversation. So with these in mind, I really do just want to pass it back over to more focused from an athlete perspective. So Marie-Claude, from an athlete perspective, how can smaller sporting events in Canada effectively integrate sustainability practices into their operations? And what are some examples of first steps that you've seen in sustainability that have been successful from your lens?
Yes, it's a beautiful question, and there's already been many measures that have been mentioned, but I think that on an event perspective, we have to ask ourselves, well, first, is it an indoor or an outdoor event? If it's an outdoor event, for example, the focus has to be on protecting the biodiversity. Also, either it's an outdoor or indoor event, is it possible to use a venue that's already existing? So, for example, if it's an indoor sport, it will be much easier to have a venue. And if it's an outdoor sport like cycling, for example, well, we can still use a venue that's already existing, like a racing track, for example. So we have to ask these questions, because also I think one of what has the biggest impact on events is transportation. Yes, transportation for athletes, transportation for staff, but also transportation for the people who attend the event. So if it's an existing venue, really make sure, for example, that the event can be easily accessible by either public or an active means of transit. So bicycle, walking, taking a bus, a train, etc. So making sure that the event, the venue is easily accessible. Also, another thing that is seen, and it's also part of marketing of our events, is promotional items. If we use items that have a date, for example, well, it is an item that cannot be reused in the sense that it has a date. So perhaps something to consider in the production of promotional items. So these are things that I think can be perhaps easily put into place. And also just to mention quickly a competition where I've been, and I've noticed that it seems to be ticking many boxes in a sense that it was a World Cup in Belgium, and the hotel where we were staying was right onto the racing course. So it was a road cycling World Cup. So we were racing on the streets, and the hotel was right on the course. So in regards to transportation, well, that was perfect, and we could also eat at the hotel. There was a buffet, a vegetarian and vegan buffet. So there was many options for athletes. So just these things, accommodation for athletes and transportation, taking a closer look at these factors can make a huge impact on lowering the carbon footprint impact of sports events.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, I think that those are very tangible and accessible actions that some individuals and organizations on the call today can take away and learn from it, and hopefully implement in their day-to-day life. So I am aware of the time. We're going to do a bit of a rapid fire answer session here. So this one is over to Paul. So Paul, we really understand how provincial sport organizations can play a crucial role in the development of sports at grassroots levels and really encouraging those to be more sustainable. So can you provide any examples of successful collaborations between PSOs and local communities or partners that have led to the adoption of more sustainable practices?
Yeah, so from PSO perspective, we obviously hold provincial championships, which is probably the biggest impact we have. But we also do a lot of work with communicating. So a lot of it is around communicating the sport itself and some opportunities and things like that. So our role is a lot in this area around providing awareness on what things are available and what can do. So in the essence of time, a simple example would be traditionally an athletics event would have reams and reams of paper for putting all the heat sheets together and all of the results sheets together, and you could go through piles of paper just to put all that together with when you've got 1,000+ kids that are competing. What we've done is implemented technology to be able to put all that online, and we not only do that for our provincial championships, so all events and heats are posted online and all the results are posted real time online, but we also provide that as a service for our over 150 events each year that are held at a smaller level, where you can come in and post it onto our website and leverage that because they don't probably have the capability of doing that. So that's a good example of that. But really, it comes down to us finding more examples like that and then going out and providing them as templates for other organizations to easily implement that doesn't cost them extra money.
The key point. How can we leverage what's already existing and make sure that everybody's on the same page and we can be using those same resources and best practices? So Shannon, similar question over to you. We know that facilities are a major aspect of sustainability when it comes to the sports sector. You've talked a lot about that. So can you talk a little bit more about how PSOs, other sport organizations, maybe some athletes can really work with facilities to support this ongoing conversation? Like, what can we do with you to move the dial on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it's really important. Communication is key. If you're looking for metrics for your event, please reach out to the venue way in advance to see if, what can they bring to you? What can they give you? What can they provide to you? And if they can't, is there a way in the meantime, with that long, with the lead time to get that information for you, so they can have a conversation with their utility providers, and their technology department, or their, anything like that. Conversations. That's the key to opening the doors, because they can't provide you what they don't know they need to provide. So I think that's really, really important, and just let them know what you expect, and then they'll have an honest conversation with you.
Fantastic. And thanks to the both of you. That was a rapid fire question for answers. So it does mean we have a little bit more time to answer this sort of final question that we were hoping to talk about. So, we looked at this conversation from national, we looked at it a little bit global, and now we're so focused. And a lot of the conversation we've had today is around that collaboration. So I just want to leave the audience here today with the answers to this question. So how can we foster that stronger collaboration and coordination with athletes, coaches, provincial sports organizations, facilities, event organizers, to collectively work towards more sustainable futures for smaller sporting events in Canada? So we did mention this a little bit, but is there a silver bullet or something like major that you would suggest to say, this is, give us a call, this is how we can collaborate in the future, and we want all attendees on this call today to participate in that conversation? If there's any strategies or initiatives you can suggest that bring promise to this conversation, how we can really work from a Canadian collective, let's call it that, to achieve these common sustainability goals. Mary Claude, we'll start with you, and then we'll move to Shannon, and Paul will get you to finish up that conversation.
Well, for one thing, it's sure that we have to continue to bring awareness about the environmental issue, and really continue to push our action forward. Like the Green Sports Day is an amazing initiative, and it's really just to gather people, get them together and discuss about the issues, find solutions, and obviously find the best ways to put them in motion.
Yeah, and I'll just mention again, like we talked about in the last panel, we're all in this together. This is all of us trying to find those solutions. So really understanding what those are, as you mentioned, and how we can move that forward. Shannon, over to you.
Yeah, just I know that athletes and organizers are busy, goal-motivated people, and so they must wear many hats, and they're in all different kinds of situations, whether it be a boardroom, an event venue, their friends, their social circles, they're on socials. Get the word out, have those conversations, and maybe somebody will say, hey, I didn't even think about, applying some of these things to a sports event or anything like that. So just continue to have the conversations, and get the word out.
Fantastic. Getting the word out, and mentioning getting the word out. Feel free to, all those in the audience, feel free to follow Green Sports Day Canada on all of our social channels, because we'll continue this conversation throughout the year and really hope to link to some resources and information as they come. Paul, final word.
Find some champions. So there's always a number of individuals that are very keen on sustainability. Find them and set them loose. Tell them they don't have a budget, but that go out and see what's out there. And it's amazing what you come back with. We had a couple of champions. We've got one right now who's on our board of directors, and he's going out and he's contacting a lot of people like the UN for Sustainability Program. We had the person that I mentioned who was working with the Toronto 2020 World Masters Games, who connected us with Dan Wilcox in the Canadian Alliance on Sport for Climate Action, which is a huge resource of bringing people together and being able to share what's going on and what options are out there from a sport perspective, and getting involved in those organizations, even if you don't have the capacity at the moment to do much, just being aware of what's going on and connecting with those kinds of groups. Racing for Zero is another group. Really, it's about those kinds of partnerships. I believe that the door's open when you have somebody really interested in and passionate about it.
Great response. And I think everyone on this call is interested and passionate. So in Paul's words, we're setting you loose. Good luck. I also think, Paul, perfect segue, because we're going to pass it over to Maddie shortly here to talk a little, or to introduce those who are going to talk a little bit about the Canadian Alliance and the Sport for Climate Action Framework from the UN perspective. So Paul, Shannon, Marie-Claude, thank you so much for being here today. Your time, your energy, your effort in answering these questions, and hopefully it gave some inspiration to those on the call. Yeah, we look forward to continuing this collaboration and this work towards the more positive direction towards sustainability in the Canadian sport market. So thank you all for being here. And Maddie, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for that really inspiring view into all the different perspectives from an athlete standpoint and a nonprofit standpoint and a PSO standpoint and facilities. It's cool to have heard so much diversity on this call already. And now we're going, I guess, even one level further out to the United Nations Sports for Climate Action Framework. And we're joined today by one of the women who was absolutely instrumental in making all of this happen. Lindita Jaferi Salihu is with us on the call. She is the sectoral lead at UN FFFC, so UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is situated in Bonn in Switzerland. And she leads the work for fashion and sports alongside other sectors. She's here to share a little bit about what is in the Sports for Climate Action Framework and what the ask is of sport organizations around the world. So Lindita, passing it to you.
Thank you so much, Maddie. I am really enjoying these conversations. So thank you so much for having me here. I think maybe just to start by saying that as Maddie said, we're based in Bonn, and a lot of the things that we do are very much led by science. And what we're seeing and witnessing with each scientific report is really that the mainstream scientific consensus on climate change is becoming stronger, and the call for action is becoming more urgent. But today we are in a situation where we really don't need science to spell it out for us. We are seeing the impact of climate change every day. And some would say that climate change today is really communicating itself. And just like athletes needing a really strong foundation to compete at their very best, the planet is no different. We need the right conditions to maintain peak performance. And without a healthy planet, there is no sport. And that is really as simple as that. So sports have no other option but to start where they are, do what they can, but also work incredibly hard with peers to use that power collectively to drive the change that we all so desperately need. Because we do believe that sport cannot not only do better in terms of sustainability, but it also has that unique opportunity to strongly reflect that purpose and set the pace for what needs to happen, but also, importantly, to communicate about the challenges that they see, both within their own organizations, but also among the communities where they are present, because we need to know and highlight those challenges to be able to find and implement solutions. And that's why at the UN Climate Change, we have designed Sports for Climate Action Framework, really with the intention to rally and mobilize sports around the world in the race against climate change. And we work with about 300 sports organizations. And as you can imagine, some of these organizations are bigger, have bigger impact. Others will have perhaps smaller environmental impact, but they are very connected with communities. That we also see a different level of both engagement, but also a different level of maturity when it comes to what sports organizations can do. But what the framework does is there to bring together sports organizations to align on a pathway with limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. And their specific commitments to halve emissions by 2030 and aspire to achieve net zero by 2040. The second step is to work to create plans on how to get there and follow those plans with concrete actions. I know somebody said before that once an organization has a strategy, it is something that really drives resources out as well. And we have seen that with our signatories. So please do not focus too much on we don't have the budgets. We have seen and we have examples already that when organizations are leading and working with purpose. There's a lot of interest out there and a lot of organizations out there that are willing to fund sustainable efforts. But what we need to do is really meaningfully engage in those conversations. I have just come now from a Sports Positive Summit where hundreds of sports stakeholders came together to discuss what can be done, what is sport doing already? And of course, there are solutions, and some of them were mentioned here. What sports organizations can do by themselves to reduce their environmental footprint. But the story does not end there. Of course, if you look at the Sports for Climate Action framework, what it does is it has two objectives. One is for organizations to walk the talk, so do whatever they can to reduce their environmental footprint. And the secondly is to work collectively, but also with their fans and with their communities to inspire and mobilize climate action across the world. And what is climate action today? If we look at Sustainable Development Goals, we're seeing that any progress that has been made already is now in danger of backtracking because of climate change impacts. So climate change is really, hurting every single progress that we're trying to do in any other field. That is why it's so important to, once you start acting on climate, to really take that holistic approach and see what you can do. What sports organizations have told us that they cannot really use their voice before putting their house in order in their own terms. But putting the house in order is impossible today because it is not a goal that we can achieve so quickly. Everything we do and touch today has carbon embedded in it. And using offsets may not be the first and most appropriate choice. What we need to be thinking about is, as an organization, you get an understanding of where your environmental impact is coming from. Look at your policies, embed environmental considerations in those things. So climate change and of course environment does not have a price tag anywhere. So this is something that we're using without actually putting a price, social or environmental cost for the things that we do. And this is where we need to collectively start rethinking our business models. Sports, at the end of the day, are also businesses in many ways. So I think it is crucially important that that buy-in is internally, both from at the management level, but also other departments as well. And it is very important that it becomes a practice to really start putting that lens on whether decisions we are taking are actually good for the environment. And of course, very clear, sometimes it is very difficult to find solutions. Travel emissions, what do you do with them? It's not like sports will, ask half of their fans not to come and watch games, or that they will, reduce the delegations that play for Olympic by half. That is not realistic. But I think what we need to be thinking about, whether there are innovative ways to do that, whether we can maybe come together and start putting the demand out there very publicly about the need for sustainable transportation and what that means. Maybe we need to be talking to cities and subnationals and government as well. It is not easy for individuals to do that, but for sports with powerful platform, and if they get a lot of friends around them, including their fans and their communities, that voice can become very powerful, because that is where we need to get to. Of course, it may seem impossible. How are we going to change our transportation systems? Is that even possible? But it is one thing that we will have to do. If you look at Sports for Climate Action, it also asks organizations to educate for climate. Education, we're not expecting that sports organizations are experts on climate change or sustainability, but there are so many avenues to explore out there by working with educational institutions that are locally present and bringing them in and talking to them, asking them what would be the best way, how can we put educational materials out there. But at the same time, there is an opportunity there for you all to work with your fans to understand what their most pressing issues are right now. It could be about difficulty to pay their bills. It could be about inability to find jobs. It could be about food security. It could be about, different things. But I think we need to know that. You need to listen to your fans, you need to hear from them and build an engagement strategy. It sounds complicated, but if you work with a multitude of institutions that you have around you, you will not have to do all this by yourself. And of course, it is so important to communicate about these things, not just about the great things that are happening. Of course, that is very important, but we also need to be talking about what are some of the challenges that are preventing us to move at speed and scale. So I would just ask everyone here today to really work with Canadian sport, to get them to sign on to the Sports for Climate Action. It is not a destination. It is really the beginning of the journey. It gives you some goals, which are pretty hard right now, but it gives you an opportunity to really align your strategy, to focus your efforts, and to see whether we can get there. We will have to get there. The world will have to get to 50% reductions by 2030 if we are to live on a livable planet. The second thing that I'd like to ask you all to do, please, is we have just launched a global survey trying to figure out if we can work out on a strategy, how can sports work better with their communities? And we have shared that. It's called Bigger Than the Game, and I'm hoping that Jill will share a link with you. It will be open for another month. We have more than 1,000 responses, but it would be great to also hear from Canadian fans and communities in terms of what they know about climate action, what it means for them, and how we can build some communication strategies around that. So we do rely on you. Working with sports has really been one of the most enjoyable projects that I lead and run. There's so much enthusiasm and energy, but sometimes these things can really feel a bit overwhelming. We have so much to do, but I think we have to eat the elephant piece by piece. So we've got to start thinking, what can we do today that is really easy and we can do it by ourselves? And then focus your efforts on these global initiatives to start changing the world. Because here, under Sports for Climate Action Framework, we shouldn't be talking about plastic bottles and whether we need to change those or not, because that is up to the organizations to do. It's easy. But we have to start thinking about transportation systems. We have to start thinking about economic systems. And we have to start thinking about how can we use our platforms and our networks and the ecosystem around us to help us change the world into one that is of sustainable development. So I'll stop my intervention here, Maddie, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Lindita, and great segue. We also have Dan Wilcock on the call, who's going to join us for a few minutes. Dan is the Sustainability and Governance Manager at the UN Global Compact Network in Australia. But before he left the Great White North to go to Australia, he was at Canada Games Council, where he founded the Canadian Alliance on Sport for Climate Action, and he remains the co-chair of that network. So he joins us to tell us a little bit more about what Canada is doing on this, what Canadian organizations are involved in, what you can do to become involved in the Sports for Climate Action Network and all the work that's happening there.
Bonjour, hello everybody. I'm hoping that I'm coming through loud and clear, but I'm joining the session today from Lutruwita, Tasmania, and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of these lands. So yes, Tasmania is that speck of land at the bottom of the world and home to the real devils. I'm currently working here in my other country with the UN Global Compact. But my sport background was particularly in snowboarding. So my kids were both Canadian born and finally had the chance to take them snowboarding in Australia, where most of my time was spent this winter. But unfortunately, it was a really tough winter here. So it was a reminder of the challenges we're facing, as I couldn't even get them on snow, when we made that effort this year. So again, I've been watching with horror the sort of extreme weather across the Northern Hemisphere and smoke and fires across Canada. And have to say we're feeling a little bit nervous about the summer ahead here. But having said that, while it's just after 4 a.m. Here, it is fantastic to see so many familiar faces on my screen. So thanks, Maddie, for the intro, and to the whole GSD team for bringing us together to connect on really two of my favorite subjects. So it's sport and environmental action. So the Canadian Alliance on Sport for Climate Action is actually a virtual network of people who also really care about those two things, sport and environmental action. And so think of it as team sustainability for Canadian sport. These are really like-minded people who are aware of the impact sport can have on the environment, but also the power of sport and the opportunity for sport to affect positive change towards more environmentally sustainable behaviors. So the Alliance really operates through regular calls to exchange information updates and through social media. I'll circle back to some of those practicalities in a minute, but it came about through, you've just heard from Lindita. It really came about as a local initiative directly as a result of the UN Sport for Climate Action Framework. In fact, the logo for the Canadian Alliance provides a nod to that history by adopting the UN blue colour with the obligatory maple leaf there. But as has been mentioned, in 2019, when I was CEO of the Canada Games Council, at the time we signed on that letter of commitment to bring the Canada Games into the UN framework. And by doing so, really committed to strengthening the sustainability efforts of the Games and increasing the level of ambition for climate action. As is pretty typical of these things, it can be relatively easy to make the commitments, but then much harder to actually work out how to implement the changes, to reduce emissions, to make positive environmental changes on the ground and within your operations. You've heard earlier from Kellyanne about the progress that the Canada Games has made and continues to make on that journey, and it's not dissimilar to many organizations both in the sports sector and in all other sectors around the world. But back in 2019, the Sport for Climate Action Framework really provided some great resources and brought sports orgs together internationally and provided credibility with the IOC and UN climate change behind this initiative. It really provided a lot of credibility, needed credibility to start those conversations, with staff, with boards, and all sorts of other groups about how to move forward in our own organizations. But at that time, I was conscious of the implementation issues and challenges that were very specific to Canada. I think a lot of action in the sport and sustainability space really originated out of Europe. And the geography of Canada is quite different. We've heard reference to the transportation challenges, and with a much smaller population spread out across a much larger country, those challenges were quite different. So things like emissions factors for carbon inventories are quite different. Political landscape's quite different, and particularly with different political stripes at the national and subnational levels at provinces and territories across the country. So really the Alliance was born when I started reaching out to other Sport for Climate Action framework signatories in Canada to discuss their experiences and to try and learn from them and figure out how we could put in place and implement actions to deliver on the commitments. And I really found there was an appetite to connect with others and a generosity with time and information and hard-won lessons, which I think is just a wonderful dynamic that I'd love people to be aware of, because sport, typically we nurture a highly competitive kind of dynamic, but in the sport and sustainability space, I've been really struck by the spirit of collaboration and goodwill and everyone wanting to see the whole sector raise its game. So in terms of some of the early conversations that really led to the core of the Canadian Alliance, I think of Joey O'Brien from the Banff Marathon. They were really one of the early leaders in the space in Canada, and Joey is one of the most passionate people you'll meet on these topics. Paul referred to, I think he was referring to Irene Maguire earlier on, who'd been part of the World Masters Athletics Toronto 2020 team. And, so people like Paul and Joey bring a lot of passion, a lot of expertise, knowledge, and experience to the space that this virtual network can tap, and you know, people generously make that expertise available to others. So in terms of format and structure, we started with quarterly calls, just by video conference. This was, you know, in the certainly the earlier days of the pandemic, and so it proceeded that way and continues that way. But it's an open invitation. The group coalesced around the signatories to the Sport for Climate Action Framework, but we quickly recognized there were a lot of others out there who were curious, wanting to learn more, maybe a little intimidated about joining up and whether they could make the commitments or getting leadership on board. So very much an open invitation. The calls share information both about the Sport for Climate Action Framework and topics and developments more generally. So I think that that format essentially continues now. Very pleased that Jill's joined me as co-chair. It's great to have someone on the ground in Canada all the time, obviously. So just to clarify, participation in the Alliance requires no commitment to the UN framework or anything else. It's really there as an informal network to support all of you who may be looking to proceed with sustainability within your sports orgs. It can sometimes be a lonely role, particularly if you're doing something off the side of your desk and you don't have the resources or the background. But I think there you'll find a fantastic group of like-minded people who are more than happy to support you on your journey. So I really hope to see a number of other folks show up to the next call. So with that, back to you, Jill and Maddie. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you for being on at 4 a.m. My goodness. Really appreciate the energy that everybody is bringing to this call. And again, there is a survey out. We did have it on the screen before. We're going to bring it back up now for just a minute. If you would like to screenshot that, take the survey, but also circulate that link to people in your network, whether it's other people at your organization, folks in your community. We are looking for as many respondents as possible. Any sport fan, it doesn't matter how much of a rabid sports fan you are. Everybody's perspectives are valued here. So we would love to get as many responses as we can. And again, it's open for a month. So thank you, Lindita and Dan, for joining us and sharing more about the Sport for Climate Action Framework. And again, these are the two people to contact if you're interested in learning more about it and getting involved.
Thank you so much.
We're now going to have Eileen McManaman join for a little bit of an international lens. Eileen is the founder and managing director of 5T Sports, based in Vancouver, but also with offices in Chicago and Europe. And she's a sustainable business champion, a sports industry futurist, and the board chair at the Green Sports Alliance, which is where Green Sports Day began. So how appropriate. Eileen is joining us today, I think, from London, because she was also at the Sport Positive Summit this week, along with Lindita. So welcome, Eileen. Really, really excited to have you on today.
Hi, everyone. It's so exciting. And it's a special pleasure to see you, of course, Maddie and Dan and Lindita, who I just saw the other night. I feel like it's, well, I won't say romper room because that's a really dated reference. But hi, as Maddie mentioned, I am the current chair of the Green Sports Alliance. Happy Green Sports Day, everyone. Today, as stadiums and arenas and speedways and golf courses and everyone else, even the CN Tower, I think, turns their skylines around the world green, our teams and gathering places are shining a light on what I hope to be a bright and hopeful future. Anyway, that's our aim. That's why we're all here. As Maddie said, I am coming to you from London, where earlier this week we did spend time with many of our global partners from Japan, the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, Australia, even Sierra Leone, and of course, Canada, at the Sport Positive Summit. But I am truly especially delighted to be with you here because while I am an American, I have called Vancouver home for the last 25 years. So representationally, I'd like to say I'm to acknowledge the land of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. For those who may not fully know the Green Sports Alliance, we are a trade organization that was founded in 2010, comprised of over 400 leagues, teams, venues, and solutions providers who came together committed to play to zero, essentially by achieving net zero energy, water, and waste in our venues, first and foremost. That has grown from there, but that is the primary simple goal. We also have an affiliated Green Sports Foundation, which is focused on all we can and must do to play for the next generation. And that is where we look to take action to advance an equitable, sustainable, and just future on the playing field all across the sector. So we step beyond our role as a trade organization to help our members and to solve very specific things, to reach out further. And the foundation is where Green Sports Day was originated, the foundation when that idea was originated. So, and I hope this hasn't been covered before because I was asked to speak to the history of Green Sports Day, which was officially declared by President Barack Obama in 2016. And it was, again, you'll appreciate the reference, a hat trick kind of day. The Green Sports Alliance was invited to the White House to share our mission. The Pittsburgh Penguins were there celebrating their Stanley Cup win, and the White House Office of Science and Technology had announced that they were going to undertake a bold new set of programs by federal agencies to tackle climate change through sports. And while that administration didn't quite stay on, we have, and so has Green Sports Day. October was intentionally chosen as it's one of the most exciting months of the sports calendar, with many seasons opening, some closing, heading into playoffs. Lots of kids hitting the fields as they join their teams. This is the time of year when everyone is playing or watching sports together. What a great time to have these conversations in the places that bring us all together, in the places where we kind of agree, unless, well, we're against the other team. But so in 2016. In 2018, the first substantial social media and building lighting began. But things really, really kicked up a notch in 2020 when Canada launched Green Sports Day Canada, unveiling its inaugural program. And I have to say, I had a little tiny bit of a front row seat to that, as I happened to be traveling a fair bit with Maddie at the time and watched her work very diligently along with Shay and many, many others to make that happen. And what an important initiative it was. While Green Sports Day was initiated by the Green Sports Foundation in the United States, from the outset, it was really intended to be a collective movement, similar to World Environment Day or Earth Day, not something that anybody owned or branded. And we've now affectionately come to call it the Earth Day of the Fall. But in that call to a collective movement, Canada was truly the first to answer that call and demonstrate global leadership with a bold and thoughtful program that could span the entire country and inspire everyone whom sport touches. Industry professionals, athletes, kids, fans, maybe even everyday bankers. Let's hope. I'm really on to the bankers right now, but we'll come to that another time. The Canada Games Council, Maddie, Shay, and the others who were there at rolling that out understood a few things. They knew that day was a platform to take and make your own, and that's something that we've seen unroll. They developed that platform into a program with multiple components, and I'm especially fond of the educational component, but also the calls to action at all levels and highlighting tools and resources that can keep everyone playing. Essentially, Canada created quite a playbook for Green Sports Day. And to speak to you in terms of what's going on internationally today, we have venues and leaders in the sports sector around the world joining us from Mexico, the UK, Germany, Switzerland, Finland, Pakistan, Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, and I'm sure many others that we may not be aware of until tomorrow when we see all the social media coming through. And so one of the questions that I was asked to address, or points I was asked to address for you is where do we think this is going? What does the future hold for the green sports movement and Green Sports Day as part of that? When I gave my opening remarks earlier this year at the Green Sports Summit, I cited 3 key areas where we must expand our efforts. The first is media. As an industry, our footprint is small, truly small, but our voice is mighty. Not using our most powerful tool as an industry is a dereliction of our duty in addressing what lies ahead. Green Sports Day is our thunderclap moment around the world. We must get louder and louder each year and work to have our others tell our stories in the other 364 days of the year. The second area is technology. We must apply the technology we already have been using to sell tickets and entertain fans, to bring fans along with us in the movement and help them envision a different future in a positive way. If we're using AR and VR to help them get them excited about the game, we can certainly use it to get them excited about a future that's different, but better. Tech not only helps us measure and lighten our footprint in the back of the house, but it's also a means to communicate our progress to the front of the house and get them to join us. The third area I felt we must leverage more is going global. While we have wonderful GSA partners around the world who do a terrific job of addressing the specific elements of the sports sector in their nations and regions, we must foster the networks that allow us to share these great ideas, these proven approaches, and most importantly, the effective tools and resources for adaptation and resilience building, both in our venues, but also outside of them in our communities. We are ensuring that, as busy as we all may get, that this green neural network is healthy and active. And one of those ways is by making sure that we're showing up wherever you're showing up. So I just wanted to close and say we cannot emphasize enough how exciting Canada's leadership has been in this space. We look forward to working with your organizations as we move forward on these 3 fronts and in bringing a megaphone to Green Sports Day in the years to come. Congratulations on another incredible edition of Green Sports Day Canada. It's been a privilege to join you.
Thanks, Eileen. Wow, way to make us all really feel good. That was great.
You deserve to feel good, you rock stars of the North.
Thank you so much. There's a lot to take away from this, right? There's international collaboration opportunities. There's a green neural network of potential, of people brimming with potential to really bring about positive change. And what I find so inspiring about what the Green Sports Alliance does is it harnesses that and it brings people together, and then it kind of channels that energy back out. So if you happen to be anywhere in the US tonight, or in Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, Ottawa, look up, because you might see a little bit of green, thanks to some of the work by the Green Sports Alliance and our team at Green Sports Day Canada, trying to light up our skies with green lights at TD Place Stadium, the City Tourism Sign in Ottawa, Shaw Centre, CN Tower, Nathan Phillips Square, the Calgary Tower, Commonwealth Stadium, and the Canadian Olympic Committee Tower in Montreal, to name a few on our side of the border. But there are dozens across the US as well, and you'll see them on social media if you're not in an American city to look up to the sky yourself. So thanks, Eileen, for bringing that perspective and that history and that motivation to move forward into the decades to come. We're going to wrap up today's session with a perspective from Racing to Zero. This is an Olympian-led Canadian born and bred team. We're really, really excited to have Donna Vacalis, Dr. Donna Vacalis, joining us, and Ollie Schofield to share a little bit about the work that they've been doing in the last few months with a sport organization right here in Canada. So Donna, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Maddie. Okay, so I'm Donna Vacalis, a 2-time Olympian, a postdoctoral researcher here in Montreal, and really lucky to be the scientific lead at the nonprofit Racing to Zero. So what is Racing to Zero? It's been thrown around and hinted at a little bit. So in a nutshell, we help sports organizations take action to fight climate change. And we do this by equipping them with the tools and the know-how. So today is about action. And if someone were to ask me, especially a sports organization were to ask me, like, what is one of the most useful and like critical actions I can take? So my answer might surprise you. It's basically the universally most important action to take as a sports org is to benchmark. You want to benchmark yourself this year. So imagine trying to improve without knowing where you stand right now. And shout out to Paul from Athletics Ontario, who spoke earlier to the very real challenge this can be and the real importance of it. So when I say benchmark, what exactly is being measured and how? That's what we're going to talk about right now. So the highest priority thing to measure, to be specific, is your greenhouse gas emissions. So these are all the gases like carbon dioxide and a few others, the ones that cause the most harm in terms of climate change. And in a minute, I'm going to give you, with Ollie, who's here, we're going to give you a behind the scenes peek at what this benchmarking looks like with the Canadian National Sports Organization. But before that, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So another word for greenhouse gas benchmarking is GHG accounting or GHG inventorying. These are all pretty much the same thing. And inventory is a really good word to use, I think, because just like a store takes an inventory of its products in a given period, any organization can take an inventory of how many GHGs it emits in a given year. So instead of counting all the products inventoried, we're counting the amount of each greenhouse gas that gets released into the air because of whatever activities are going on. So collectively, companies, governments, any and all organizations, they really need to be doing annual GHG inventories. Otherwise, one, collectively, we can't keep track of how much GHGs are being released and where they're coming from. And two, no one would be able to set goals, let alone hit their goals. And I don't need to tell the athletes and coaches in the room, in the virtual room, the value of benchmarking and goal setting. Okay, so what does this look like in practice? So Racing to Zero recently completed a project where we measured the GHG emissions for Curling Canada at some of their events. So we're going to hear now from Oliver Schofield, a fellow Olympian and the operations lead with Racing to Zero. And he talks to Nolan Thiessen, who's the executive director of marketing and fan experience at Curling Canada. And so for Curling Canada, it was their first foray into carbon accounting. And I think that we're going to hear some really valuable insights about what it's like.
Hi, Nolan. Thank you for being here and for joining us on Green Sports Day. So Curling Canada is at the start of their sustainability journey. And if we talk about the 4 steps to follow, number 1, you've started to create buy-in from your stakeholders. Number 2, you've identified some priorities through an emissions baseline. And now number 3, you're in a position to start using that baseline to then number 4, take the next steps to improve. First of all, congratulations on all the hard work you've done. But in terms of sport organizations in Canada measuring their environmental impact, we're still in the very early stages. Why did Curling Canada feel it was important to dedicate your time and resources to this now?
You know what, I think for us, it's always been, we always assess our business and what we can do to improve, what, really in any area, right? It's not just how can we make more curling shots, which is obviously, an important aspect of our business, but it's within anything. It was also a situation too where coming out of the pandemic, our board and our CEO at the time took us through a bit of a strategic rethinking, and obviously this was included within the framework, and we want to be a leader in the sports system. So we really looked at it and said, we have to start looking at this, but if we're going to improve, we have to figure out where we are before we improve. So it was just an important time in our journey, and I think it was one where we just had to, it was time to sort of, put our feet in the ground and say, where are we, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, absolutely. And was that something where, it had been talked about for a while and eventually you decided to take the next steps? Or was it an identification of, okay, this is a serious issue right now. What can we do about it?
I think it's probably both. I mean, we have talked about this for a while, but like with a lot of organizations, there was, either some trepidation or some resource issues. But, we sat there and we just said, now's the time, and it's obviously an important factor. And I know with, even the IOC, from as a sport leader, bringing out some of their guidelines and recommendations, I think, we do look at ourselves as a bit of a leader in the Canadian sports system as well. So, there's a bit of, you got to walk the walk too. So for us, it was, it wasn't that we had been putting it off. I think it was sort of coming out of the pandemic. We had the resources in the space to say, like, look, now's the time that we can't put this off anymore. We have to start to do something.
Right, definitely. And so speaking of NSOs kind of jumping into this, we found there are 4 kind of major obstacles that keep organizations from taking their first steps. A fear of a lack of knowledge. There's definitely simply a lack of capacity. We've also seen maybe a lack of incentive from government or from stakeholders, which then in turn means there's an inability to mandate action. Can you comment on how Curling Canada was able to overcome any of these areas to kick off your initiatives?
I think for us, and like with anything, it's communication, right? I think, we took a lot of Racing to Zero's comments of saying, really trying to help us understand the first step of the journey and how we can communicate it to staff, having a champion within the organization. I think it's a bit of values-based as well, right? Like if you've got people within the organization that have these values, they do care, they want to improve it in their business at all times, right? This isn't just, I think we really need to improve right now because of the issues in the crisis. It's more just like, we always have to improve. And this is another area we can improve. I think it's also just communicating to everybody, because last year was, as you outlined, a bit of a baseline for us. It was just communicating with everybody, saying, we're not asking you to do anything different right now. We're not asking you to really change anything. It's just sitting there going, this is one of the most important times of the year for us. But we're going to have people there that are going to help us. They're going to help us chart a path forward. And we just need you to do what you normally do and just help them out so that they can help us. They're the subject matter experts, right? They can help us chart that path forward. So, for us, I think it was a small investment I think that's the fear, right? Is you look at the end and saying, it's going to take so much of an investment to make all these changes. And it's like, but it was a small investment for us in the grand scheme of things to at least figure out where we were. And that was the big thing for us. And then I think the other thing is, as I said earlier, was just a bit of a champion within the organization who, can, one, help explain to Racing to Zero our business, right? So that we are getting actual quantifiable data out of this, right? I was able to, with a couple others of our staff members, to be able to outline for you what our business was and what things really were, right? But then I could also take your information and go to the staff and help alleviate some of the concerns on their side in terms of what's being requested. So just someone who's taken the time to kind of know both sides and be able to communicate it, I think was key.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next question. So let's discuss that baseline assessment that we at Racing to Zero helped and worked on with you at the 2023 Briar last year, or this year, I should say. So we measured the carbon emissions of the event, we took them from the arena, the patch, modes of transportation, as well as waste diversion, water consumption, and a review of your supply chain. So can you talk about the process of getting those measurements and maybe highlight anything that you had to do differently when you were planning the event in order to get the results that we were looking for?
For us, I don't think we had to do anything a little bit differently. I think, as I shared earlier, a bit of it was communication, right? This is the most stressful time of our year for people who are on the ground, because it's the execution of, our one of our tentpole events. But to just be able to tell them, this is why we're doing it. This is, we're not asking for you. You don't need to be on pins and needles. You don't need to think. Nobody's judging you that you're doing anything wrong. You just gotta. People are going to be asking you questions because they're trying to just get data, and we just need to help them get data. I think was a big piece. How can you make an impact? How can you make a positive improvement if you don't know where you are? So the fact that, the staff had those values, they do want to make improvements. We always want to make improvements, but they understood we don't know where we are. So we got to help. So we got to help the subject matter expert figure out where we are, right? And then we can maybe make some improvements. So I think that was the big thing for us, was just kind of, obviously people are stressed out and when they're at an event, because it means so much to our sport. So it's just making sure that they know, that this isn't something extra. This is just something to help us improve.
Right. And what it seemed from our end is building in kind of the extra requests for data of the things that we needed. It was already built into meetings and stuff you're already doing. So from the sounds of what you're saying is having staff with those values of wanting to improve, but also understanding the need for this, meant that you didn't really have to work hard to create buy-in. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of them just understand the education of your group needed to come in and they needed to be there before we turned anything on so that they could get an assessment, right? And then they would take readings throughout the entire. So with meters that are already at the building, this isn't something that's was a major thing, right? Like, sure, if you go to someone and say, hey, I need to assess your water usage in the building over a 10-day period, someone like me, or my event manager would go, I don't know what to do for that, right? But to be able to say, look, you need to let Oliver and his team in so that they can make that assessment before we start, okay, that was easy. That took a couple minutes, right? Like it wasn't that major of a lift once you really understood what was being requested.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so moving on, when we discuss sustainability, people often gravitate towards waste reduction. But what we found is that by tackling carbon emissions, you can actually have a much bigger impact. So having gone through this process now with us, do you have any suggestions on what can help our community to tackle those emissions reductions activities instead of waste reduction?
Yeah, it's definitely a hard one, right? Because you can't make purchase decisions for fans or people that are coming, right? But you can lead by example. You can try to do things better. Sure, we're a huge country, right? And when we mass is we have a huge footprint, and we love to get everyone together across the entire country in one place. There's something special about that, right? There's community, there's Canadiana, but there is a footprint from that, right? And I think for us, that was a big one for us, was to figure that part out of, it's less, it's not about waste and water and all that other stuff, but if the biggest piece of it is this, okay, how can we make an impact in that? And I think yeah, as you said, there's fear out there as well about how, like, making this massive impact and being able to fix everything at once. And I think for us, we kind of looked at the baseline, the assessment of, and said, okay, well, you know, your group was able to show us, okay, here's some things you can do right now, low-hanging fruit, for lack of a better term, that you can, these make some improvements. Sure, it's not perfect, but it's improvement, right? Improvement is better than just sitting there and going, well, I can't fix everything all at once, so I therefore will do nothing, right? Right. So that's really what we were looking at, and then it's sort of how do you lead by example? How do you incentivize better decision making? I guess, you know, if you can't directly fix it, how can you incentivize those better decisions, right? And so that's those were some of our takeaways from it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really nice point of finding that balance of what you can do now while also working towards the major stuff, the biggest impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so final question just to wrap up. Are there any high-level lessons that you learned and that you can share with other NSOs or sport organizations? Perhaps, you know, anything that ended up being more interesting or more useful than you might have expected?
I think the biggest thing that I would recommend to everybody is do the work before you make any proclamations. Right. And it is not that we did make proclamations, but I see now once we got the baseline, I'm really glad that we weren't just saying all these things, just, you know, because we wanted to release a press release that made us seem like we were this great organization. And I think, you know, you're an athlete, we're a national sports organization, like, everybody has goals, right? Everybody's, you know, often the goals are grandiose, right? Your goal is to win world championships and Olympic medals and all these things. But then you get down to, well, how do I do that? I successfully execute my plan, or I successfully repeat my skill over and over and over again. You know, you assess everything to this minor level to create this major impact, right? But how do you don't do that unless you look at each of the minor pieces of it, right? And I think for us, instead of making these big proclamations, we made the investment right now to figure out where we are. And then, yes, now we want to improve. How can we improve tomorrow? How can we improve 6 months from now? How can we improve 10 months from now? In that process, and continually keep figuring out, you know, because how do you know what your improvement is unless you know what your baseline is, right? So for us, I think that was kind of the impetus for where we're at. But as I said, you know, do your work, plan, figure out where you are, and then, you know, tackle the small stuff now, and tackle the, you know, have a plan to maybe tackle the big stuff in the future.
Right. Fantastic. Okay. Well, that's everything. Nolan, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks, Oliver. Thanks for having me.
So I would like to say a huge thank you to Nolan at Curling Canada for his time for the interview. And what you're seeing now on the screen is an example. So, like, let's demystify this. Here's an example of what a completed GHG inventory can look like. Basically, you are tallying, and in a panel earlier where we heard from Catherine, who described some examples of how the Canadian Olympic Committee activities get tallied. So you see here, what you see is basically, think of a checklist where all the activities that generate emissions, maybe say electricity and fuel used to heat or cool a hockey rink, or the fuel for shipping equipment that you need for a competition abroad. All of these things get tallied and sorted into categories. We're not going to go in and explain all the different categories. There's just two things I want you to take away from this. Basically, that these categories are standardized, and there's international standards that everyone can follow, so that everyone's playing by the same rules. And this means, one, you get an apples to apples comparison to yourself, to your organization year after year after year. And it also means too that different organizations, say basketball and snowboarding and cycling, they can all see where each other stands and have a relative sense of how they're doing. So ultimately, what do we do with this? So in the real life of an organization, ultimately this allows you to decide, okay, what projects am I going to do? And a common way to do this is to use an abatement curve. So there's another image here I want to show you. And this is the last thing we're going to talk about. We're comparing here the cost for reducing emissions across different categories. So this is how we know which actions will have the biggest impact and the biggest bang for your buck. Maybe you want to tackle the easiest and cheapest first. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that some actions will reduce emissions and even have a negative cost. That means that they're saving money. And then on the right-hand side, as you go up the curve, you get the more and more challenging, more expensive actions. So an organization like yours or like Curling Canada can look at this kind of data and make really informed decisions to then execute, i.e. like take action. And this in a nutshell is how it, like what it looks like under the hood. So I just want to wrap up this segment. I hope that we've given you a little bit of insight into what carbon accounting actually is and what it could mean for you. So Oliver and I will remain for questions. I'm going to pass it back now to Maddie to moderate any questions that have come in through the Q&A. Thank you very much. And there's one question in particular from Abby McCauley. I don't know if we have time to answer it live, Maddie, or we can do it later. So, yeah.
Yeah, you've got about 2 minutes if you want to go.
Great. So there was a question I saw come in on the Q&A from Abby McCauley. She asked what free tools are available for grassroots sports organizations to measure their environmental impact. I have an answer. Maybe Ollie, you might want to expand on this, but specifically for doing an inventory, there are free guides and there are also free spreadsheets that are designed for an organization to go through this exercise. And really the global hub for this is the World Resources Institute. So I don't know if we can throw a link in the Q&A for people. I'll do that in a second, actually. I just want to add that there are these great free tools. It can feel a little overwhelming at first to do it all on your own. And because I don't have time to kind of walk you through in details here online, I would suggest actually just emailing me at Racing to Zero, Google Racing to Zero, and someone on our team. We can try to answer in more depth your specific questions and try to help.
Awesome. Thank you for addressing that. There's also resources on the British Association for Sustainability in Sport website. They just put together a whole new resource hub. The Sport Ecology Group has a free to use carbon accounting or carbon calculator that we've created for sport federations together with World Athletics and a few other global federations. So that also is there. If you need it, email me. And there's a number of experts on this call, Ollie, Donna, Shay, who would be more than happy to help anybody who's looking to get their carbon accounts in order. So lots of good resources there. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Ollie. Thank you, Shay, who couldn't be with us today, but was part of the mastermind project behind all of this work at Racing to Zero. So hi, Shay. And as we close up today's session, there's a few things that I wanted to share in closing. I guess the first big one is this has been a huge collaborative effort, which is kind of unusual in sports. And I think it's important that we point that out. In Canadian sport, you typically get some collaboration between PSOs and NSOs, and then like the Olympic Committee and Paralympic Committee around games times to coordinate teams, but we don't often collaborate on big things like this. And so to have Canada Games Council, the Canadian Olympic Committee, Green Sports Alliance in the US, Racing to Zero and Head to Head, 2 Olympian-led organizations right here in Canada. Colin Campbell, who's been on the tech for this call, amazing, from University of Toronto's Climate Positive Energy Network. We work together at the University of Toronto, and my team at Sport Ecology Group, who helped to kick this off 3 years ago by helping me to write a letter to our minister and basically say, hey, we would really love to have a Green Sports Day, can we please? But since then, it's been a huge team effort. There's a lot of people involved. And here's some of their faces, because I think it's important to give credit where credit is due. So Martha McCabe, Philippe Marquis, Melissa Humana Paredes, Emily Fournel, Oliver Schofield, and Shay Smith and Donna Vakalis are all our Olympian athlete representatives and members. They bring so much expertise and energy to all of our meetings. And then we have Jillian at Canada Games Council, Colin at U of T, Anne Peguerero at University of Guelph, David Thibodeau, also associated with Canada Games, and Catherine Vial-Gravel at the Canadian Olympic Committee. It is not common to get a coalition going that is this big and this diverse. And so really, really cool to see this happen. Thank you all for being a part of this. Thank you to everybody who joined today. We wish you a very happy Green Sports Day. And if you're out in a city in Canada tonight, look up to the sky and see those green lights. We are so excited to celebrate with you. With that, we'll leave it there. Happy Green Sports Day and have a great rest of your Thanksgiving weekend.